I sent it to my own.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for November 26, 2024. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karsbeck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Here.
Trustee Wing.
Here.
Trustee Kurtz.
Present.
Trustee Ayers will be absent this evening.
Thank you, Clerk. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for anyone in the audience tonight to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up? Okay, thank you very much. We don't have, do we have anyone online by chance?
We do not.
Okay, excellent. Next is consent. Would trustees like anything removed from consent? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve? Oh, you do have something.
Yeah, I would like to remove item F.
Item F, the Habitat for Humanity fee waiver request. All right, is there a motion to approve minus item F?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. So we can move on to the Habitat for Humanity fee waiver request. Mayor Pro Tem?
My only request, I think this is an excellent thing we do every year. Typically, Habitat comes forth with 2 proposed houses that need waivers. This is under ordinance 847. My request would be for us to tackle this in the next year, a revision on this to update the numbers and also encompass our water and wastewater tap fees, but I don't think that's necessary tonight.
I think you actually brought this up before for.
Just bringing it up again.
Yeah, okay. Well, I approve.
You just need to kind of work through it and have discussion.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a natural outgrowth of our housing plan that we're working on anyway.
Mhm.
So I think that makes a lot of sense.
All right, great. We
That's all
have
I've
a
got.
director in the audience tonight, so thank you for showing up.
Mhm.
Okay, seems we're all good with that. Would anyone like to approve item F or move to approve item F?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Clerk, may we have a roll call vote?
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Wing.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. All right, thank you. We can move on to the regular agenda tonight, and we'll start out with the Youth Advisory Committee update. Welcome.
Thank you. That's cool. These are our 2024 goals, achievements, and future plans. So our goals for this year were to boost recruitment, and we did that by getting me and my friend Harper to join the committee. We wanted to create a youth-focused calendar of community events, which we did. And our vision this year was to build youth engagement and enhance community presence.
So kind of our key accomplishments of this year were that recruitment and retention, and so we created a calendar of events to help attract some new members, which obviously worked. We explored the scholarship incentives, which did not work, and recruited 3 of the 5 board vacancies that we had starting this year. And we also did well with our community engagement. We held events such as our B-Rads, our B-Rad nights, and we supported many local events this year.
Here is our calendar of the events that we did and all of our meetings, how many meetings, and just a calendar of events.
Yeah, if you want to take a look at those real quick, there's all the bulletin points of our meetings and events.
When is Coco with Santa?
That one's in December. We haven't done it yet, but we're getting ready to do it.
It's at the rec center, and so we just kind of help out with whatever they need us to do there.
Okay.
So some of the committee improvements we did were some volunteer tracking, and so we established a nice system to log volunteer hours, which helps the high schoolers, well, we're all high schoolers, it helps us get our graduation requirements. So we had over 100 volunteer hours, and there's an attendance log. I don't know if we can go into that, but that kind of shows just what we've done this year. We've added a BYAC member to the port committee for a stronger youth voice on town projects, and we gave input on that port survey from this year, and the questions kind of became more inclusive, not just to adults, but to some of the teens as well.
For our future, we're going to be having a shift in focus. We're going to move away from organizing events and planning events and move more into becoming an advisory role. We're going to request that you guys give us some more updates on like town projects so we can provide our perspective. We're going to broaden our representation on current town boards, so we're going to add more youth members to different boards. And then for educational outreach, we're going to explore our government administration classes to attract youth interest in learning governance, and we're just going to learn more about government so we can become more knowledgeable on it. And we're going to host a Northern Youth Advisory Conference to provide an educational experience.
Our budget considerations for this upcoming year, we would like to host a youth commission conference with a guest speaker and provide meals.
So we were kind of thinking with that Northern Youth Commission Conference, as we can see many advisories from around the northern Colorado. There we go. If they want to come in, then we can talk, get guest speakers and whatnot, and just kind of bounce ideas back and forth.
So our request for board support is some in the last slide. We want to commit to foster youth leadership, and we would like to ask for the funds for these two activities that we have on our slide. The first one is the DC Youth Leadership Conference. This is going to have us have a better understanding of how to run a commission, and then have us practice best for our commission or other ones. And our other one is the Northern Youth Commission Conference. We would like to host it and gather at least 4 to 6 commissions in Colorado for us all to learn from each other. For our communication, we would love it if we had updates on things that like in the town projects that request youth perspective.
So to recap all this, we had successful recruitment and community outreach, and we had wonderful operational improvements. Our future focus is to enhance our advisory role, support but not make new programs, and provide educational opportunities to bring back to our community. And BYC is dedicated to representing Berthoud's youth with responsibilities and strategic impact. Any questions?
Awesome, great job. Trustees, any questions? Yes, please, Trustee Wing.
You guys should be so proud of yourselves. Seriously, this is awesome. And presenting tonight and everything you're doing, and I'm very impressed with the group. I thought you did a great job tonight.
Thank you.
Very, very nice job. I do have one question.
Okay.
So you have a budget request of $30,000.
Yes.
Do you know what last year's request was by any chance?
I think it was also $30,000.
Okay.
I believe it was.
Thank you. Great.
Yeah, they're all been roughly around 30, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to add? Our trustee liaison,
Sure,
trustee
yeah.
Albright?
I just would add that these guys are amazing. They're very brilliant, and these are the future leaders of Berthoud. And so when they were mentioning going to DC and joining the youth advisory commissions from around the United States at DC and learning, and then they talked about bringing that back to Berthoud and enhancing the youth's voice in our community, I just was blown away. Like, this is, huge milestone steps for these guys, and, they are gonna hopefully take our seats someday. And so the more we can invest in them, the better our community's gonna be. So
Awesome.
they're doing awesome things.
Do you mind describing a little bit just the residency requirement resolution here? You guys updated some
Yeah,
residency policy?
Yes.
so we were looking through it this year more recently, and we thought that it was a little bit too restrictive for what it was. The old requirements were that you had to live in Berthoud and go to a Berthoud school or be homeschooled. We felt that we knew many students and friends that lived in here in Berthoud, but the requirement of being at a school here in Berthoud didn't apply to them, and so they went elsewhere because that's what they decided to. So we decided to open that more up, so you have to live just in Berthoud, because we feel like we want some of those other views as well.
Thank you. Makes sense to me. Cool. You staff liaison, anything you'd like to add? You don't have to, just thank you for
No.
being here tonight.
I'm okay. They
Great,
did a
awesome.
great job this year. We really appreciated all their help.
Yeah.
They helped out with our events tremendously, so, and still are, so we appreciate all of them.
Yeah, it's incredible. I second trustee Wing and what trustee Albrecht said. It's awesome to have you guys in the first place, right? It's a ton of work, and you guys making changes here that are really exciting, and I'm so excited that you guys are able to go to DC. That was one of the plans when we started back in the 27 or 2018 for this, so it's awesome that this will be realized. DC's fantastic, so. Just give a chance to anyone in the audience that would wish to speak to this. Okay. Okay, great. Anyone like to move on resolution 2024-17? Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to bring up a question,
Sure.
actually.
Sorry, kind of cut Sean off here.
No, that's okay. You guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate your work. Also, as the tree committee liaison, we're ready to accept one of you into our ranks. And then as for the DC trip, if we could just get an email kind of breaking down costs, expenses, and kind of itinerary, that'd certainly be appreciated. And then I had one quick question on the resolution. This would be looking at the red line in point number 3. I just thought the wording was a little wonky. Maybe that's just me. I question whether if we could change it to something along the lines of residing within the town.
What is it currently? Because I don't know.
Right
that.
now, I'll read it for everyone. The commission shall consist of 7 members, all of whom shall be full-time students with the town and at least 13 years of age. That'd be an acceptable modification?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the intention is residing within the town, so.
Mhm.
yeah.
That's, okay,
Cool.
that's all I've got.
Anything else? Do you want to?
Could you just help me with the procedures a little bit? So they're asking for the budget, but that's not what the resolution says.
No, this is just changing the budget, the request that it would be adding to what we have in the budget right now.
So
And
it's not a town, we don't vote on it, that just goes to the
Well,
town with their
go ahead.
budget?
You will
Commissioner.
vote on it when we deal with the town budget. We'll talk about that a little bit later this
Got it.
evening.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Good question. Oh, do you want to go ahead and move on that, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, no problem. I'll move to approve resolution 2024-17 with the modifications stated to that point. A resolution of the Town of Berthoud Board of Trustees revising the residency requirements of the Youth Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem has moved on this resolution. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy,
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being here tonight.
Thank you.
This is awesome. All right, next is the Laramie County Open Space. This is a funding request, and I think we have a Laramie County rep in the audience. Excellent, welcome. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Good evening, I'm Megan Flanagan, and this is Alex Schwartz, and we're here from Larimer County Natural Resources Department. And we've been talking with Chris Kirk and staff about a project, a land conservation project we have now a signed contract on here just directly west of Berthoud. And it's in an area of our master plan. This map is out of our Larimer County Open Lands Master Plan that we call the Blue Mountain Conservation Area and our Little Thompson River Conservation Area. And if you can see my cursor, oh, nope, it's not showing up on the map, but right at the very south end of the county, you can see the label for Red Tail Ridge Open Space. And this is a property Larimer County acquired in partnership with Berthoud and others back in the year 2000. And it protects the mountain backdrop. So it's a ridge line that goes right to the Boulder County line and about a 3/4 miles to the north. It's not yet open to the public. We've been working since the year 2000 to add to the property, have some easements to give us connectivity. And the project we're bringing to you tonight helps further some of those goals. So here's a bit of a close-up map. In the bright green is Red Tail Ridge Open Space that owned by Larimer County. Everything in orange on the map already has a conservation easement on it, so it's still privately owned but has limited development rights. Those conservation easements are mostly held by Colorado Open Lands, a statewide land trust. That land trust also holds a conservation easement on Red Tail Ridge Open Space. The property in red is owned by Arrowhead Properties, LLC, and it's about 204 acres. And it comes right to the corner in the upper right of the map, that's County Road 4. So it comes right to that corner of that intersection. And we're looking to acquire it. It doesn't have any current improvements on it. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. It's a beautiful property, intact grasslands and shrublands. And you can see how it fits in relationship to Red Tail Ridge Open Space and some of the conservation easements in this area. It also fits into a larger complex with Boulder County. So Boulder County's Rabbit Mountain Open Space just to the south. If we zoomed out, there's quite a bit more to Rabbit Mountain Open Space and a lot of conservation easements in Boulder County that are to the east and south on the map. In the purple is a trailhead easement that we had negotiated with the same landowner in the last 5 years or so, and some trail easements shown in the dashed lines. So we were able to obtain some connectivity to be able to have a trail system and trailhead into Red Tail Ridge Open Space in the long term. This acquisition helps us just further ensuring the protection of this property because it could be developed and we just would be holding that small trailhead and trail easement. The total acquisition cost is $1.8 million. Larimer County, we have the lion's share of that cost. We have a partnership already with the city of Loveland. They've pledged $200,000 towards the acquisition. And we have a private individual who lives in the Loveland area who's donated $50,000 towards us acquiring this property. And we're here tonight because we would love to lower our obligation at the county and are seeking a partnership from the town of Berthoud. So just to show you 4 photos we took, the first 3 will be from a ridge line right in the middle of the property and looking to the west from north to south. And then the 4th photo is actually down on Rabbit Mountain Open Space looking back across the Larimer County line. So looking to the northwest, Red Tail Ridge Open Space is the entire backdrop or the horizon line of the photo. It also goes an equal distance over to the west, so you can't see the other side of the ridge. But everything in the immediate foreground, so this rock Dakota sandstone ridgeline, and then down the slope into some of these drainages is all part of the 200-acre acquisition that we're currently working on. This is directly west. You can see it's mostly grassland. There are some shrublands and there's some ephemeral riparian drainages on the property. And then looking southwest, where it's forested in the far distance is Rabbit Mountain open space.
Just while I got you on this picture, so is Parish Ranch right there too? Right below it? Is that the dark area where all the trees are? Not
Yeah,
sure.
it's kind of, the Parish Ranch is kind of down in the Little Thompson River drainage more. They do own a little piece, that orange strip between Red Tail Ridge and Arrowhead. I'll just go back real quick to this map. This skinny orange piece within Larimer County between Red
Oh,
Tail
okay, that's, okay.
is owned by the Parish family with a conservation easement on it. Yeah. But the preponderance of the Parish Ranch is actually in Boulder County. And then this is that last photo, so we're up on Rabbit Mountain open space looking back to the north. Red Tail Ridge is everything to the left, that horizon line. You can see the Horsetooth Supply Canal in the mid-slope. The parish conservation easement is that bright green line of trees. And then everything we're looking to acquire is kind of the brighter yellow into the shadows as you head to the east. So it really illustrates that complex that we're trying to create with Boulder County and Larimer County on this common boundary.
No, I think you did an excellent job.
Can we answer any questions?
Awesome, thank you. I'm surprised and delighted that Loveland's willing to kick in this far over, so that's neat.
Yeah.
Administrator Kirk, do you have anything you'd like to add before we go to questions? This is a funding request, kind of open-ended.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've looked at our budget. We do have some money included in the draft budget tonight that we can present to you and kind of show you where that can fit, if that's something that you're interested in supporting. We obviously think that strengthening our partnership with Larimer County, especially as we continue our open space acquisitions along the Little Thompson River corridor, I think there will be some give and take as we kind of do that in the future. This is certainly in our community area, just to the southwest. So from staff standpoint, if the board is so inclined, we would support that contribution.
Questions, trustees? Trustee Wynn.
Why do they want to sell that, you know? Arrowhead, Mr. Hild, I don't know how to pronounce his name properly, but.
Hildy is
Hildy, thank
his
you.
last name. You know, let me go back to the first map. Those areas directly to the east of the red Arrowhead property are still owned by Mr. Hildy and Arrowhead Properties. He went through a county conservation development, and he carved off all the parcels up along County Road 4 there and is actively marketing those for residences. And part of that conservation development is you are required to put the majority of the property that's not subdivided into a conservation easement.
Okay.
So he did that. We, you know, over the years, we were talking about a conservation easement with him here too, just to protect this view shed and part of this. But in the last couple of years, he'd put it on the market and decided to sell it. I don't know.
Yeah, I know the conservation easement idea was not something he was looking to do for this property. He was talking about developing this area too. At this point, we've been in talks with him over the years, knowing that we had interest in it. And when he was going to put it on the market, he gave us a call and just wanted to see if we were still interested.
Great.
So.
In exchange, on a conservation development, the exchange for open space is a little increased density on the built-out portion. Did I understand right? Okay.
Yeah. If you cluster the development into a more confined area and leave the rest as residual land is the intention.
So that orange piece just to the east of our subject property is a property that was conserved during that rural land use process.
And where does the Little Thompson Farm fit in here? I see the river, so that's kind of, okay. It's off this map here, but it's close.
Yeah, let's see. It shows up in, as you follow the Little Thompson River corridor to the east. It's, sorry I don't have a pointer, but it's a square on the map along 287. So it's quite a ways to the east of this area.
Other questions?
I just want to clarify the ask, the financial ask is to make up the difference of what's left of that 1.8 million. So it'd be another 200K from Berthoud.
That is what we've been talking with staff about, but I'll defer to Chris as he's kind of looked through numbers more specifically.
We do have 150 included in the budget. I think we could do 200 if that's something the board wanted to do. As you know, we have several open space acquisitions underway right now as well, so trying to balance those funds, but I think we could do that if we could do a full 200 if that was something the board wanted to do.
Would this be coming from the Larimer County Open Space?
Yes, although so I'll show you tonight as we go through the draft budget, but most of the money that we would spend actually is coming from other funds that we transfer into what we call the Larimer County Open Space Fund.
Great, other questions?
One quick question. Have you guys at the county sought any other funds from like Lyons or Boulder or Longmont?
We have been in contact with Boulder County, and we're working on some other projects in this immediate area with them with a cost partnership from Boulder County into Larimer County, but not on this exact parcel.
Okay. That's all I've got.
So this is more informational. We'll cover this under the budget at the end, right? Yeah.
We can, yes.
Yeah, we can. Great, I'm gonna open it up to the audience, just in case anyone in the audience has a question regarding this. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you, guys. Don't feel the need to stay through the budget, too. We can let you know afterwards, but welcome to. Thanks for coming out tonight. Good to see you. Okay, next, item number 4 here is the assumption of the Welch Avenue outlots, and Administrator Kirk's gonna be presenting on this.
Thank you, Mayor Karsbeck, and trustees. This one, I hope will be relatively brief. The Nielsen Greenway, as you know, runs along, it starts kind of up at the corner of Welch Avenue and Brooklyn Parkway, and it runs southeast down along the drainage corridor through behind the high school, just north of the high school, and then continues down all the way to Spartan, basically, Spartan Avenue, where it hits the railroad tracks. There are some outlots on Welch Avenue, just east of Berthoud Parkway, that the town has been maintaining for years, I think under the assumption and belief that they belonged to the town, because they're all part of that Nielsen Greenway trail system. Those were never transferred to the town as part of that original development of, I call it Berthoud Commons. I don't know if that's what the subdivision was actually called, but that's what I call it. But that subdivision there, Common Drive, Madison Avenue, Monroe Avenue, Vine Street, you can see there to the south of Welch. And so our intention is to acquire these lots from the current property owner as so that the town will own them. We're maintaining them anyway, as we already mentioned. We mow them, we clean the drainage, we maintain and plow the trail through that corridor. So it makes sense to us that we would formalize that. There are some taxes that need to be paid, and that would be the only outlay of expense in order to complete the transaction. It's a couple $1,000s. I'm sorry, I don't have the number right in front of me.
$2,851.
$2,851, thank you. $2,851 in taxes that we would pay and then record the transfer.
I think the development's called Berthoud Commons, right? So
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
That's what I've always called it. There's not a sign out.
Yeah, I think Berthoud Heights is above it. So we would be taking this over from their HOA?
So I don't believe they have an HOA or the one that's very active. Again, we've been maintaining it, and so we would be acquiring it from them.
Yeah.
But like I said, we've been taking care of it for years, for as long as it's really been in existence, as far as I know.
Just curious. Cool. Questions regarding this? Trustee Wing?
Was there any irrigation on it?
I do not believe that stretch is irrigated. There may be some irrigation along Welch. There are some trees along the road, but most of it is just native grasses through there.
Any plans for that? Just kind of keep it as is?
Yeah, I think we would keep it. We'd continue to mow it just as it is. It stays looking pretty nice for the most part. The parks and open space crews do a good job of keeping that.
So is it weeds? Are we mowing weeds?
No, there's native grasses.
Native
There are
grasses.
weeds that come through there.
Okay.
Our crews do. We have we do some dry land management through that area, through that whole stretch. We just actually reseeded some of the Nielsen Greenway last year. It didn't take because there's no irrigation there, and we had a super dry summer, much drier than we expected. But we don't have any current plans to do any other landscaping through there than what's already there.
My head, when I walk past there, it's pretty green.
It is.
Yeah.
It stays pretty nice. Again, it's primarily native grasses along the drainage channel, and then I think there is some. There may be some irrigation along those trees. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. That helped to supplement some of that stretch. And then I think there is some sod as you move a little farther east.
And the property taxes are the town of Berthoud?
The property taxes get divvied up to any taxing entities that levy taxes within the town, so it's not all just the town of Berthoud. Those would get divvied up again to the other taxing entities like the fire district, school district, library district, the town,
But
the county.
ultimately, we're paying ourselves. We get the revenue
We'll
for the
get some of
taxes
it
and then
back.
we're paying.
We'll get
for
some of it back
Yeah.
via property tax, yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? Anyone in the audience regarding this? Okay, clerk, do we have a resolution number? Is it 2024-18?
Yes, it is.
Anyone like to move on to 2024-18?
Sure, I will move to approve resolution 2014-18, a resolution of the town of Berthoud trustees approving the payment of outstanding taxes for and accepting title to certain real property parcels in the town of Berthoud.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second with the correction to 2024.
It does say 2014 on our
I know.
document, so which one's correct?
Well, it's blank on the resolution that we're, so should we just 2024-18?
The correct
Oh, the
resolution
cheat
number
sheet
is
says 2014. I was like, huh?
2024-18.
Okay. Yep, so 2024-18,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So trustee Kurtz has moved on this resolution. Mayor Pro Tem has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Excellent, all right. Moving on to item number 5 here. This is a 270 Mountain Avenue property purchase contract, and we have Walter Elish here. Welcome, Walt.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to come before you this evening to present a project that I think addresses the vision and goals of the town board that you all set in place. It's also a project that sort of fell in our lap. It also took some creative thinking by our town administrator, Chris Kirk. If you recall, back in August, the House of Neighborly Services came before you and requested $6 million to offset their cost of constructing their building over in Berthoud Commons behind 7-Eleven. And although there was a lot of discussion by you all, rightfully so, and although you're generally in support of their project here in Berthoud, the $6 million price tag for you all took up a lot of discussion. At that point, if I recall, you directed Town Administrator Chris Kirk to go back to the drawing board to see if he could work out something with them to make this project come to fruition in Berthoud. Chris did that. We met. Where the creative thinking came in is, if you recall, in the Mountain Avenue Corridor Overlay Plan, one of the renderings in that plan is the renovation, redevelopment of the former Sunoco building, 270 Mountain Avenue, right at the corner, right at the railroad tracks in Mountain Avenue, 30,000 square foot building. Chris remembered that photo. And one of the ideas that we came up with was, what if we purchased that building and made part of it available to the House of Neighborly Services for them to renovate that space that they could house to provide the services that they want to provide in the town of Berthoud. It's an exciting project, just thinking about it and talking about it, because that building, as many of us know, as the Mountain Avenue Corridor Plan indicates, having a 30,000 square foot warehouse manufacturing building right in the heart of our downtown is not the highest and best use of that building for us. So Chris and I have been talking about that building for 5 years now. We met with the owner a couple times to see if we could get him, at this point, to buy into our vision for that building. And he said, hey, I like your vision, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I mean, it's gonna take some more time, gonna see more development in Berthoud. The economy's not there yet, but keep me in mind. So we've been having those discussions with the owner off and on for the past 4 or 5 years. So when this opportunity came up, we thought, what if we looked at this building, made a portion of it available to the House of Neighborhood Services, 15 to 20,000 square feet, and then opened that south end of that building that fronts Mountain Avenue for sort of like a food hall, retail, commercial. I mean, this would be, we thought, as we thought about that, the more excited we got. Because we felt that this would be a catalyst for our whole downtown. And it's something that we as a town envisioned for that building for at least since 2019, I think, when the Mountain Avenue Corridor Plan was approved. So, Chris then had discussions with the House of Neighborly Services management team, had a couple of meetings with them. They liked it. They thought it could work for them. And not only were they excited, we were excited. So at that point, being that there was some general support from them, we then contacted the owner of the owner's listing agent to see if the building was still available. It was. And to make a long story short, we made an offer on the building. It was listed at it was listed down from 3.6 million to 3 million. We made an offer that was lower than that, and we agreed on a price of $2.95 million for that building, contingent upon the due diligence that we're doing. And so that's where we are. That's where we are this evening. We made an offer on the building for $2.95. They accepted it. And now we're doing a 120-day due diligence period, looking at, we had an appraisal done, we had a phase 1 environmental assessment done on the building, we're looking at some other things on the building, but that's where we are at this point in time. So we thought, since we bring this to you, this buy and sell agreement, that we think it's a good deal. It's been signed. And like I said, we're doing our due diligence at this point. It's an exciting project, we think. We think it is. It touches, I think it checks a lot of the boxes that we have envisioned for the town and goals for the town of Berthoud. It allows the House of Neighborly Services to really put up a facility that they wanted to develop in a little, maybe less expensive manner than what they were planning. It gives them the opportunity to sell the property that they have. And then hopefully we would attract commercial uses from that property. It's as part of the Berthoud Commons development. It was zoned commercial. So that's what we would anticipate happening with their site, or the site that they currently own. So that's where we are. And we're doing our due diligence, as I said. We agreed on an asking price at this point. And I think Chris wants to follow up with a photo or two, and we'll show you what we have in mind for the building. It's in addition to what's already in the Mountain Avenue Corridor Plan for this facility.
Thank you.
Yep.
So if I may, I'll just show you a couple of pictures, because I think there's some exciting possibilities. You know, since we discussed this last with the town board, we had the opportunity to put together a LOI, as Walt mentioned, and get a agreement prepared. And we also did the phase 1 environmental and the appraisal that Walt talked about. And then we also had Asher Architects, who we're already working with at 2nd Street and Mountain Avenue, where the skate park is, on some design concepts for what could work there. We asked them to do some quick design renderings for this facility as well. So at least we could kind of see both what could it be, but also could H&S's needs fit within that building, and kind of how could things lay out. So we have like what I would call a 5% concept design, so don't get too hung up on it. But what you see on the screen is actually the rendering from the Mountain Avenue overlay plan. This was kind of the original idea for redevelopment. It's a very large building. It's one of the bigger buildings in town. Especially, it's the biggest building along this stretch of Mountain Avenue by a significant margin. So it's 30,000 square feet. The idea was that you could peel off some of the existing facade and leave the structure underneath exposed as kind of a shade area. Have a platform for outdoor dining or gathering. There's lots of space for art like murals or other kind of artistic additions. Lots of greenery, making it a very attractive, inviting space to really draw folks from kind of where the core of downtown is to the east. But then also the large parking lot on the east side of the building. We think we can fit, 75 or so additional downtown parking spaces in that stretch. So that was the Mountain Avenue concept. Back from 2019, we said, hey, Asher, take that concept and let's play around with it and let's see what else we could do. Let's see if we can lay out the space that House of Neighborly Services needs, how much room would be left for retail in the front and community space. And so what you can see on the right is a kind of a conceptual floor plan and site plan, how you might access the H&S area to the back. What's actually really kind of cool about it is that it has existing loading docks because it was an industrial use. And so H&S could use those to bring trucks in as needed to offload supplies and those kinds of things. The building is really elevated, and it actually gives us some ability to do some creative things in the front. We think we could lower the floor on the inside of the building to create more clear height space inside, and that would allow us to create a second floor mezzanine that could be extended out onto the street facade. Still creating some large outdoor dining, gathering spaces. There's an existing rail spur. You may be able to bring in a rail car on the west side of the building and turn that into more leasable space. That could be kind of a fun way to add to the building. There's actually enough property on the west side between the railroad right-of-way and the building to even add some exterior decks along the west facade that you can't see in these photos. And I have some closer in shots of the renderings. But what we wanted to convey is that there's plenty of room for what House of Neighborly Services needs. The Life Center is an area where they can lease additional space out to other nonprofits in town who provide similar services or other community services that are needed. And then we think that there could be a really nice large meeting or gathering hall that could sit maybe 150 to 175 people at tables and maybe 300 people in chairs. That the town could own, but that H&S may manage for us and schedule and handle those things. And then there's still a lot of room on the south end of that building for some creative retail. Micro retail is something we've talked about a lot. Really small spaces. If you have a home-based business and you're looking to kind of put a footprint out into the world, but you don't want to lease 2,000 square feet in a traditional shopping center because it's really expensive. Maybe we could create some cool micro retail for 400 square feet or something. We could lease it out to restaurant uses or, as Walt mentioned, kind of a food hall. Or there's a lot of really neat examples of these kind of industrial buildings that have been renovated. And it would help us achieve a lot of different goals. These are just close-in shots, or a little bit closer in shot from what was on the previous page. This is looking to the northwest. We like the idea. Asher suggested you could, improve the facade on the corner to bring in some of that historical brick look from downtown. Even though this is a big metal industrial building, we might be able to add a little bit of nod to some of that historical feel. Again, you can see the mezzanine concept on the second floor. The floor height wouldn't be really high, but it would be enough that you could get up and above the street, which would actually create some really unique space. Be a great spot to watch parades, but also just a cool spot to hang out on a Friday night. And then this is the front facade looking to the northeast from that kind of southwest corner of the building. And again, these are just some concepts we did in a couple of weeks just to say, what could we do here? So again, if you hate the idea or the architecture, don't get too hung up on that. I think it looks great. I think there's some tweaks we'd probably want to make, and I think there's some areas of this that may be more expensive than we want to do as well. And so I think our goal is still to do this within a reasonable budget, but one of the things that we learned during the appraisal process is that this is a very challenging investment property. The cost per square foot for industrial space really exceeds what you can get for this building because it has some unique issues. It doesn't have drive-in access to the interior of that building. You can only get in through the loading docks or through man doors. So that kind of limits its functionality in some ways. It's right in the heart of downtown, and there's no outdoor storage. And especially for light industrial uses, outdoor storage is a big deal. So it has some real challenges from an industrial investment standpoint. And really, it's ripe for redevelopment on Main Street. So I think we're excited about the possibilities. Happy to answer any questions you have about the contract. We have a lot to work through as we get into, if the board approves that purchase and sale agreement, we've got a 120-day due diligence period. We'll want to, in parallel with all of that, get an agreement generally worked out with H&S for how their end of the building would work. We'll try to refine some of these architectural concepts and get some good solid budget numbers for what we think it might cost to do this. We have some rough estimates just based on, what does it cost to do tenant finish? What does it cost, per square foot? How much would it cost to renovate the parking lot? We have some good numbers that we think from estimate standpoint give us a solid idea of where we might end up, but we want to refine those over the next few months as we go through that due diligence period.
So, and where would the money be coming from?
So our intent, and we'll show you in the draft budget tonight, is that the majority of the purchase price for the building would come from our ARPA funds. The American Recovery Plan Act, that's what ARPA stands for. That was the money that we received during COVID. Communities received, I hate to use this term because it sounds flippant, but it was like manna from heaven from the federal government during COVID. They just started sending out millions of dollars. Maybe that's why we have runaway inflation. I don't know. But anyway, we got sorry, we got $2.25 million plus or minus from the federal government. That money has to be obligated before the end of the year, and that can be done via a contract, which this would serve. So we have some reporting we have to do in April. If we don't obligate that money before the end of the year, we could be at risk of losing it. So that would fund the majority of the purchase price. The rest would come from general funds.
Other questions?
I have a couple.
Please, Trustee Wayne.
Is that the mayor's bug in front?
That's actually running, so it's not.
So you touched on it, but with very little detail. So is House of Neighborly Service looking at the 11,007, or are they also looking at the Life Center 7,300 acres, so about 19,000 square feet?
Yeah, the Life Center is part of their operation. So they have the House of Neighborly Services would be their House of Neighborly Service operation. The Life Center is space that they would then manage and lease out to other nonprofits in town.
But ultimately, they would have the master lease on it, if you will.
Yeah, they would control that space.
So do you have an estimate on price per square foot that we would charge?
No, and so we've talked about a couple of different options, and I think a lot of that gets driven by the town board and kind of what your goals are. I think there's an opportunity for kind of a reduced below market rate lease. We talked about condoing out of the building and selling their portion to them. I think there's a couple of different options that are possible, but we haven't worked those details out yet.
That's what the purchase payment is, that they would potentially buy it, is that?
It could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when do you think you'll have?
I think that's something we need to do over the next 120 days. So
Okay.
we need to get something back in front of you that we've generally agreed to with them so that we're all on the same page about what that looks like.
How old is this building approximately?
50 years plus or minus.
Is it,
1970s.
is it hot?
I think.
Does it have any asbestos? Is there remediation that needs to take place?
We've done our phase 1 environmental, and so that is primarily a historical record search as well as an on-site visit. They recommended additional testing to confirm that there's no asbestos or lead paint. So we'll need to do that over the next 120 days.
That can be extremely expensive. So I just wonder if we should we haven't signed the contract yet, right? Or have we?
Well, it's
Buy it?
contingent, right?
It's contingent on
That's
your
what I-
approval
That's what I'm
tonight.
asking.
Yeah,
But that is part of our due diligence
Okay,
review.
okay.
Yeah.
That's all I have, thanks. It looks beautiful, by the way, and the artist rendition, I think, is gorgeous.
I mean, I had no real questions. I just want to compliment, Walt and staff and H&S for coming up with, I think, a really creative solution that works for everybody. I think, as well, like you said, this checks a lot of boxes, and so I trust that for the Life Center and the H&S, this meets their needs as opposed to the other site. And so that's just really awesome. Y'all were able to kind of put this together. On kind of the south side, I mean, I guess generally I'll say I'm supportive of executing the contingent contract, but yeah, on the south side, I think whatever we can do, like micro retail, some sort of lease structure that helps kind of restaurants get off the ground, and maybe some sort of incentive for them then to stick around in another part of Berthoud with like a 2-3 year lease, just to kind of get the wheels churning. But yeah, I love the concept, and yeah, the architecture, it looks good, here, but yeah, I know would further refine it, assuming everything else panned out. So yeah, great job.
I do have one question. The parking looks way bigger than, I guess that's because right now there's semi trucks there, so it makes it look smaller than it is. So that's a lot of
The
parking.
parking lot is very large, yeah.
And then two, there's like a little house there kind of with a front porch. Is that part of this?
It's part of the sale. We would.
Is that your new office?
No. It depends on how quiet it
That's
is.
our new town hall. That's our town hall.
Yeah, it's kind of like a modular building. It looks like a little bit like a log cabin.
Yeah.
Our intent would be to remove it. Yeah. Make more room in the parking lot.
Other questions?
No, the only thing, at $5 a square foot, you generate $100,000 a year, so there actually is a payoff to this building over time.
If the entire building leased out for $5 a square foot, and I don't, well, again, we haven't talked price per square foot, it's probably about 20-year payback plus or minus
Right.
for the purchase price, not including any, improvements that we make, but,
I think
yeah,
this could be
we're all for that.
transformational and drive a lot more growth and more commercial tax, retail tax down the road.
And I think, we're obviously not developers. We're not profit motivated in that sense. We want to be fiscally responsible, but there's also some real exciting opportunities here, I think, for, like you said, as a catalyst to some other redevelopment opportunities and economic opportunities for micro retail and other stuff that just, I think, really makes some good sense for what is a very challenging property otherwise to redevelop. And Walt has met with the existing owners and lots of other developers who really specialize in downtown redevelopment projects. And this is really too big for most of those redevelopers. They don't want to take on 30,000 square feet as a total redevelopment project. And again, as an industrial project in the heart of downtown, it has some real limitations. And so it's a very unique property. And we think, obviously, or wouldn't have brought this to you, that the town is kind of uniquely suited to take this on.
One final question. Okay, so BNSF would be the immediate neighbor, but we've obviously done the research there. They don't own anything underneath or.
Yeah, so what's interesting, and I don't know that we will get the title information once we sign the contract, escrow will get all the title work done. They'll send that over, and Alicia or someone at Aaron's office will review that for us as well. But there are actually two properties here, legal parcels. There is the building and the parking lot, and then there's another piece actually between the building and the railroad that is not railroad property. Now, there may be overlaying easements through there, but typically railroad right-of-way, especially when you look at, the GIS maps and the parcel maps, railroad right-of-way is usually owned and fee by the railroad. It's not like overlaying on somebody else's parcel. At least that's how it exists in most of town. And so
we would own it outright, not to worry about it.
we believe we will own it outright. But
Only reason I'm asking is
we'll
if
go
they
through all
plan.
that as part of the title commitment process.
Okay, because if they plan on double tracking that would get real close, but.
There's actually more room than you'd think
There's a
there
lot of-
too. There's actually a decent amount of space there between
There's
the
a,
building
there's
and the
a
tracks.
spur there now.
And this, it may be obvious to everybody else, but in like the world of economic development monopoly, across the street in Caddy Corner is the other property that we've been brainstorming on. And so getting two things going effectively on the same block of Mountain Avenue
Would be pretty exciting.
Pretty big catalyst, yeah.
And really, if nothing else, just the parking lot alone is pretty awesome. I mean, it's something we hear a lot about, right? And we wouldn't buy a $3 million building for a parking lot, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a big addition. position.
I think it's also temporarily, there could be something worked out with food trucks. Another thing we need is just seating
Absolutely.
and stuff.
That's
true. Ms. Tomasi, do you have anything to add? You don't have to, but I see you in the audience tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
If you could come up, just because the mic.
Of course. Yes, just letting you know, we have been in conversations with Chris regarding this, and as far as H&S is concerned, we're all excited about going forward to continue to explore. Obviously, we've got to find out more details as far as what that end partnership would look like cost-wise and all of that, but from everything that we've discussed so far, looking at the space, Asher has fit our space into that from the other buildings, so we're not losing the concept of what we do. We've also talked to many of our donors who donated the property and stuff, and they are super excited about this direction as well, because their goal, like ours, we're not looking to own many buildings or property or anything like that. We're here to serve. That's our mission. That's what we want to do. And in order to do that, we need more space. We need our own space to do that. And so this meets that need for us. And so we're super excited just to see where this goes. It gives us the opportunity to get into a space much quicker and at a lower dollar figure than what we were looking at before. So we feel it's a win for us. We feel it's a win for our community. And we also feel it's a win for other communities in the future, because if we come together in this type of partnership with nonprofit in town coming together and all the nonprofits that will be able to have space in there throughout with the Birth and Life Center combined with us, this is something that is sitting on the scale of some unprecedented, I think, especially for this size of a town to come together with us to say, serving our community is important, and we're going to come together to make it happen and provide the resources for our town and for our community. And so I'm also just excited to see what this might inspire other towns to do if we are able to move forward with this direction. So yes, as far as H&S is concerned, we are excited about continuing to explore this opportunity and see where it could lead.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Tomasi? Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to this? All right, bring it back to the board. How's everyone feel about this? Trustee Wing, we'll start with you.
Yeah, from where we started, I commend everybody on the board for, the dialogue we had and a little bit of healthy pushback. And I think financially, these guys are gonna be in really good shape based on, what the first option was. So I commend the staff. This is just one of those things where we kind of stood back and said, hold on, sounds a little rich. Let's see if we have some options. And, where there's a will, there's a way. I think this is very positive. There's a will. What?
You said there's a will. I generally go the other way. I break things. So.
Sometimes there's a way.
I'm glad this worked out. Yeah, awesome. Mayor Pro Tem, anything you want to add?
I couldn't add much more than thank you, staff, for coming up with such a creative solution. I think this absolutely checks a lot of boxes. I think we've all been looking at that building for a long time, and dwelling on that, but I'm really excited about this project. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't have to. I just couldn't down the line. Trustee Kurtz?
No additional comments.
Yeah.
I think
Trustee
it's, I've been eyeing this for years too, because, we've talked, you and Chris, and I said you call Berthoud Station, and it'd be our future train station in 20 years when they finally put a train through here again. But the extra property that's out there on the west side could be the platform. So, but, yeah, I think it'd be good to have the town control in it again to get it back, because I know the new Freedom Center, the church sat vacant for years before Grace Place bought it and renovated it, and there was some concern over that, but look at that building. I think it turned out really nice. And so I think taking this building back in control, make it what we want.
Trustee Albright, anything you want to add?
I agree with the sentiments of the board. I personally want to thank Walt Elish, because I recall a few years ago you having this vision of this building, and I remember you just mentioning the food hall and micro business idea, and I thought, wow, that's creative for that space, because I didn't see any use for it. So I do have to commend you for having this vision, and then when the time was right, when this came about, really pursuing that, because we could have missed the opportunity, and now we have a really hopeful opportunity, so thank you all. That was a huge thing on your part, and I don't know, isn't it manna from heaven? This building's gonna pay for itself with grant funding, help revitalize our downtown. My one, comment will always be, how do we make it look historical? If we could model it closely to the original train station to take notes and keys from that, I think that would be perfect. Adding the rail car obviously is so cool, and we're providing vital resources to help people through HNS in that building more quickly. And so we're keeping our Berthoud people thriving and happy, and hopefully adding vibrancy to our downtown with affordable retail space, and please push restaurant space as much as possible. But thank you guys for jumping on this opportunity and just creating an opportunity for us to approve a great vision. So thank you.
I agree with all the sentiments and Ginger's too of combining nonprofit with for-profit and town government. This is very exciting to me. So I know, like you said, it's very preliminary, and I hope everyone gets satisfied. But if it all works out, fantastic, especially on the east end of town. I've heard, and I agree with there's not been enough effort on that side, so folks kind of feel left out on the east side of the railroad tracks. But man, this would be huge. So yeah, I'm in support too. Sounds like we're all in agreement. Anyone like to direct? This is just direction to town administrator, I believe.
We'd like you to approve the purchase sale agreement.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was included in your.
Sure, I'll,
Oh, yeah.
so item 5, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so, I'll move to authorize the town administrator to execute the contract to buy and sell real estate located at 270 Mountain Avenue, Berthoud, Colorado, 80513.
Second.
All right, Trustee Kurtz has moved on this. Mayor Pro Tem has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Yes.
Trustee Wing.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. Very cool. Item number 6 is the 2025 annual budget. And we have, this is a second draft here.
It's gonna sound like I'm popping champagne.
It's already champagne. I wouldn't hold it
I
against you.
think I can think better.
I'm sure in the history of birthday that you wouldn't be the first to be drinking out of that bias. So.
Whichever you want. It's the best name presentation.
As long as my battery doesn't die.
Jeff told me sometimes there was a guy back in the day, he was a mayor pro tem, he would actually read the newspaper because he just like did not care. Yeah, back in the day when nothing was going on.
During the birthday,
Oh, it's all in one. Almost got a little too excited there.
Can I present on YSC?
I could. They did an awesome job, though. I would not do it well. Here, start from current slide, right? No, that's not right.
fly rods.
That's at the Arboretum.
Future fly rods. Oh, big for fly rods.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Chris has, it's pretty renewable.
You still gotta show me how to manage this calendar, so if you wanna talk about tech.
Christian probably has to show you some of that.
I
I
can't figure it
didn't
out.
even know that you could pull up all the slides at once. So
Ah.
you taught me something new tonight. Well, thank you, Mayor Karspeck and trustees. The last couple of years, I've presented the budget from the podium because it's just a little bit easier. I am going to talk for a little bit tonight, so feel free to stop me at any point as we go through this presentation. My goal tonight is to walk through each of the funds that we manage and oversee, talk to you about kind of them in summary, but also highlight any significant initiatives or projects, new personnel that we might be recommending that we hire, or anything that's out of scale from last year so that you kind of understand where changes occur. Much of the budget is, as you've seen, hopefully, as you looked through the budget packet that was included with your agenda packet, much of the budget is kind of a carryover from year to year. We don't just, we don't zero base, we don't go back to zero and start from scratch every year. We have a lot of ongoing expenses that are similar from year to year. Great examples are things like chemicals for the water plant. Those don't. What drives those changes are increase in demand at the water plant or increase in prices. But they don't go away. We have to use chemicals as part of our treatment process. Much of our budget is that way. There is some discretionary spending built in there, and where you guys, where the town board wants to have influence there, we certainly welcome. And we can talk about where some of those areas exist. But starting kind of from the very beginning, this is what our budget calendar looks like typically. We did the mid-year budget adjustment in August, if you'll recall, for the 2024 fiscal year budget. And we immediately transitioned from that into the next fiscal year budget, which is obviously 2025, which we're talking about tonight. We presented a draft budget to you on October 8th. If you'll recall, that's a very high-level kind of initial look at the budget. Much of that is carryover from year to year, and then with any significant capital expenses, equipment purchases, and capital projects that we know we're going to be working on the following year, we try to get those in. And then we actually have most of our department budget meetings occur after that initial draft presentation. We do that to meet statutory requirements to present a draft budget to you by October 15th. We go through with each department head and review their requests for personnel and equipment and new capital projects. We look through the current year and where are we not spending as much money as we thought we would, and where can we bring some of future year spending down. And we also look at other areas where maybe we're spending more than we thought. Utility prices go up, chemical prices go up, sand and ice slicer goes up that we use to maintain streets in the wintertime, those kinds of things. So we try to make those adjustments if we're off, if we know we're off base for the current year, can we make those adjustments and get those corrected for the following year. We'll do our draft budget presentation tonight, our second draft. This we feel like is darn near complete. We want your feedback about where we spend our money because I've said this before and I'll say it lots of times again, our budget is our policy document. Where you spend your money is where your priorities are. And so we feel like it's relatively complete based on the priorities that you've outlined and your strategic planning effort and the priorities that we have from primarily driven from master planning efforts that we've initiated, presented, and that you've approved. That's what drives most of our expenses. And then we just have daily ongoing operational expenses of managing the town. We will do another budget review on December 10th. We can go through that in as much detail as we need at that time. The last few years, that meeting has been relatively straightforward. We typically have made a handful of changes at most between this meeting and that December meeting where we would ask that you adopt and approve our budget. We would also adopt the fee schedule at that time, formally adopt our fee schedule for the coming year, as well as our mill levy for property tax purposes. And so I touched on this the last couple of years, and I just wanted to touch on it briefly again. Government is driven by fund accounting, which is a little bit different than how private sector accounting works. And it's really just an accounting system designed to track for accountability purposes that money that is collected for specific purposes is spent for those specific purposes. And so the town has a number of different funds, and we'll talk about what those are in just a sec, or the types of funds that we have. But when you look at the budget, our numbering system is pretty simple. The first two numbers are the fund itself, so 11 would be the general fund in this example. The department is the second set of numbers. The general fund has many departments, but they all come out of the same bank account if you want to look at it that way. But we track expenses within those departments for the purposes of monitoring and managing those expenses with those particular services, but they all come out of the general fund. And then the account number at the end, that 4-digit number, is a specific line item. And so if I reference a number, or if you have a specific question about a specific line item, that's how we would navigate to it. It's our kind of Dewey Decimal System for the budget, if you want to look at it that way. And then our primary fund types. So our general funds, these are general municipal services. They are typically not accounted for in any other fund type. And what we typically pay for with general funds are things like street maintenance, park maintenance, public safety, community development, general administration. Our enterprise funds are our utility funds, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Those enterprise funds are more like business type activities, so they're not supported by taxes, they're supported by fees for service. So you pay a fee, for a water bill, and the fees that we collect pay for the service. Our goal is to collect fees sufficient to operate those systems, and then also to save some money to make needed capital replacements and capital expansions in the future. But those enterprise funds operate a little bit more like a business. And then on the special revenue funds, those are typically things that have been approved by voters, and they are restricted to very specific uses. So our examples in our budget are things like the open space fund, the two 1% sales tax funds that we have. They are restricted to uses that were outlined in those ballot measures that were approved by voters. We cannot spend that money on anything else other than the specifically outlined allowable uses. The medical marijuana 7% fund, that was approved by voters, has very specific uses. So we'll talk briefly about what those are as we get into each one of those funds, but just know those special revenue funds, when you see that money sitting there, the only way you could use that for something not in that fund would be to loan it to a different fund. But like, if the medical marijuana fund, for example, is restricted to youth activities and public safety primarily, you couldn't go spend it on water or wastewater, as a good example. And our kind of general approach is, what do we need to do to maintain our existing service levels? Then what do we need to do to expand our services to accommodate continued growth, expansion of our community? And then lastly, what can we afford to do from a priority standpoint? What goals have we set via master planning or strategic planning, and which of those things can we practically fund? From a planning standpoint, you'll see in the general fund in particular, but a lot of our restricted special funds come from impact fees. And so new development has a significant impact on how much money we collect in those special revenue funds and also in the general fund. You can see what our residential permit numbers have been in the past and what we are estimating for 2025. The 2024 number is an estimate. We're, as of today, I think we're right at 200 single-family permits, but there's a whole lot of other permits that drive some of that revenue. Commercial permits, multifamily permits, even, hot water heater replacement permits. But from a budgeting standpoint, it's easiest kind of estimate the number of residential permits, because that's in general over the last decade has been the driver of those building-related revenues. So again, we look at what are our existing services that we provide, and what do we need to continue to do in the coming year to maintain that service level? What do we need to do to expand those services? And then what are the priorities that this board has set, either through strategic planning or through master planning? Can we incorporate those into the budget? So you'll recognize these, hopefully. These are the goals that you set as part of your strategic planning effort in the summer this year. And I put these on the screen not to go through them in detail again, but to just show you that each of those that have some specific budgetary need have been identified, and money has been included in the budget to cover each of these. So the work session that we did at the top with Walt, that didn't require funds. We did buy pizza, but that's kind of covered in other budget. But that's not something that we need to spend a significant amount of money on. Alternatively, like an economic development strategic plan, we may want to hire a consulting firm, and so we've included some money in our professional fees budget line item in economic development to do that in the coming year. So again, that's true of all of the board's priorities that you've set with respect to intentional economic development, enhancing our community, and environmental responsibility. And so I'll identify the vast majority of these as we go through the budget as we go through each fund. I'll bring those up during the highlights. If you have questions about those now or later, I'm happy to dive into those in as much detail as you'd like. Any questions at this point? Slowly raising his hand.
Thank you for letting us ask questions. Firstly, you did a really nice job of setting this up. When you hit the next slide, is it gonna be numbers?
Almost.
Okay, then I'll wait for one slide.
So, in the general fund, again, that's where a significant amount of our services are covered. It's where the majority of our personnel is paid for. It's streets, it's parks, it's community development, it's economic development, it's engineering, it's finance. The general fund is supported through a variety of different revenues. They're outlined here. I won't go through every single one, but I will show you that taxes are the significant majority of the general fund revenues, property and sales taxes. In the 2025 budget, we're estimating a little over $13 million in total revenue for the general fund. Every year I've been here, Cindy is a great conservative financial officer, as you all know, and we've exceeded revenues, our revenue projections every year. I've been here, and I think they were doing that before I got here, so I'm not taking credit for that. A lot of that is driven by Cindy's conservative budgeting practices. I think that's good practice. It's helped us to generate larger financial reserves for the projects that we have in front of us. Again, taxes make up about 71% of total general fund revenue. The rest is spread between building and planning fees, municipal fees. When you see transfers, those are typically from other funds. The water and wastewater funds, they don't have their own accounting staff. They don't have their own human resources staff. And so they pay overhead expenses to the general fund for some of those services. So you'll see things like transfers. That's typically those types of, we're moving money from one fund to another to pay for a specific service or item. Licenses and permits, I think that's pretty obvious. Charges for service is like recreation fees. So our outdoor recreation budget is all included in the general fund. What happens indoor at the rec center is all within the 2019 1% fund. So the recreation expenses you see in the general fund are tied to outdoor recreation. The lease revenue that we receive here at this building in Old Town Hall, that's some minor revenues. Most lease revenue we receive here at Town Hall for Independent Financial and for Edward Jones goes to pay our Property Owners Association dues for the rest of the shopping center. Now, this is just the tax revenue portion of that pie. The majority of our tax revenue is sales tax driven, and that's true of most communities in Colorado. Most municipalities rely on sales tax to make the world go round. We do have property tax that we receive. We all pay property taxes, and our portion is a very small portion of the total mill levy. It's actually less than 10% typically of most mill levies in town. It's a much smaller percentage if you live in a metro district because the metro district is about half of what you're paying in property taxes. But even in those areas where you don't live in a metro district, the town's portion of the property tax is still a very minor percentage. The rest goes to other taxing entities, again, like the school district, the fire district, the library district, the county, so on and so forth. And then sales and use taxes that are paid on building permits is about 9% of that total revenue as well. And from a budgeting standpoint, we don't have a policy in place to do this, but we try not to use sales and use tax on building permits as operating expenses. We try to save that money in general fund reserves that can be used later. And that's so that we don't become reliant on building in order to continue to operate the town and provide the service levels that we have. Now, on the general fund expenditure side, public safety is the largest chunk. It's almost as darn near equal with what we spend on general administration. Parks, planning and building, and streets maintenance makes up a little more than a third, and then the rest is divvied out through the rest of our general fund departments. And here are the numbers associated with the general fund expenses. what you'll see is, again, public safety is the bigger piece of that pie. That pays almost exclusively for our Larimer County Sheriff contract, but it also covers our code enforcement expenses. And a big driver of the difference from 2023 to 2025 was the addition of code enforcement staff that you approved last year. And then this year, we'll talk about this in a minute as we get into the general fund a little bit more. We're going to recommend that we authorize another position with the Sheriff's Department for community impact deputy.
So now here's my question. Thanks again for taking them. As I look at as you get into the other funds, so as I look at this holistically, and again, I may just be interpreting or not understanding, we may have already discussed this, but the 2025 revenues are essentially 46 million and the expenditures are 86 million.
Yep.
So we got a $40 million delta there gap.
Yep.
You can see that it drains our existing balance from 120 million down 40 million to 80. If we go with the philosophy that 25 is going to mirror, be very similar to 26, and we have another shortfall of 40 million, I'm just wondering, is that sustainable, or what am I missing here? And you may or may not go through all the funds, but as I look at it holistically, it's just that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I appreciate you bringing it up. As we identify these expenses, we try to outline it in terms of what we think are ongoing operational expenses and one-time capital needs. And so those one-time capital needs vary substantially from year to year. They're driven by discretionary spending on things like the Sunoco building purchase we just talked about. What you see here in this capital projects line item at the bottom, those are generally discretionary capital projects or capital purchases that we have saved money for. So we don't finance anything, with the exception of the rec center, which we did finance. Like we don't finance vehicles. We pay cash for them, we use them for their useful life, and then we'll trade them in when we buy new vehicles, or we'll transfer them to other departments. We'll make do with what we have. And so those we try to capture in our, it depends on the nature of where they're getting used. They might get charged to a special fund, they might get charged to the general fund. But the significant majority of those capital projects, and we'll talk about those here in a minute, are one-time discretionary spending. And so they don't represent a structural operational deficiency. We're spending money that we've saved on one-time needs.
So those capital expenditures are embedded in these expenditures for each one of those funds? Is that what you're saying?
They are. And so you'll see as we go through each fund, the delta between what we're collecting in revenue and what we're spending is all coming from saved reserves.
Okay.
So it's not coming from operational revenues. It's coming from money that we've set aside with the expectation that we're going to have to pay for
Those
stuff.
capital expenditures are still real money, it's still cash.
100%.
And in this particular year, there's a $40 million shortfall, which, okay, but I guess my question would be, do we see a significant reduction in capital expenditures in future years, or how do we mitigate this negative?
The answer to that is yes. And again, so if you look back all the way back to 2020, our revenues versus expenses, we collected $69 million in revenues and spent $53 million because we didn't have any major capital projects in 2020. In 2021, it was $53 million in revenue and $39 million in expenses. And so I would not call this delta, I'm sorry, I don't remember the word you just used.
Shortfall.
I would not call it a shortfall. A shortfall from our perspective would, if, for instance, if we were going to collect $3.9 million in revenue in the water fund, for instance, but it cost us $4.2 million to provide that service, we'd be in a lot of trouble because we'd have a structural deficiency that we needed to fix with increased revenue or decreased expenses, right? One of those two. That is not a sustainable model for operating the water fund. A lot of these expenses are special revenues, things like capital fees that are not ongoing revenues. They get paid one time at a building permit, for instance. We build up a bank of 10 or 12 or $15 million, and then we spend that all on that capital that we collected that money for. But it's not but it's not an operational expense. And in years where let's say the economy, hit a big setback, our ongoing revenue dropped by 12 or 15%, we could cover our expenses just to operate our continued services. We actually might still choose to execute capital projects with capital fees we've collected, one-time revenues for one-time expenses. Or we might choose to postpone those projects and hold off and just keep that money in the bank. But again, it's not a shortfall from an operational standpoint. It is a delta in total, but again, in a lot of cases, those are capital fees that are one-time revenues for one-time expenses. Where we collect ongoing revenues for ongoing expenses, in those areas, we do not have a shortfall.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
Last question on that. So past capital expenditures, we did not amortize the expenses of those going forward. We pay for them
We
cash
pay cash.
the year, and so it's almost like we're clean every year going forward.
That's true.
Okay,
The one caveat is the certificates of participation we issued for the rec center. We did issue debt to pay for that, much like you would a mortgage, right? We could have saved money for 30 years and hoped to pay cash for it at the end of 30 years, but everybody would have paid for it for 30 years and not got to use it. And so issuing debt to build that up front and paying that off made some good sense. We got outstanding interest rates there. That is wholly contained within the 2019 1% fund, and that's what that fund was intended to pay for, was those regulations.
thank you very much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Absolutely, those are
That
great
helped a ton.
questions.
That helped a ton.
Great questions, and feel free to ask any more, even if some of that doesn't make sense as we go forward. Let's jump back into it. So on the general fund, fund number 10 in the budget, again, there are a number of departments within the general fund. In total, we have 44 full-time employees budgeted in the general fund, 2 part-time and 8 seasonal. And again, those are spread between administration, finance, HR, economic development, community development, streets maintenance, parks maintenance, and outdoor recreation, and code enforcement, public safety. I think that's everything. This year, we are recommending and would request approval for a new full-time facility maintenance technician. We own a lot of facilities, and the maintenance is all kind of done ad hoc by staff members there. When things fail, oftentimes Christian at Town Hall is the one that takes on finding a contractor and organizing some maintenance activity. We'd like to have a more consistent facility maintenance program for all of our facilities, water plants, wastewater plants, Town Hall facilities, streets maintenance facilities. A new full-time parks maintenance technician. As you all know, we continue to expand the park land that we own. We just expanded Pioneer Park. We're expanding some other parks and open spaces, and so adding another parks maintenance technician to our crew would be a big benefit to them and their ability to continue to keep our parks looking incredible. A new full-time planner. We have historically had 1 community development director and 1 planner. We'd like to add a second planner to help deal with ongoing development applications. The full-time capital projects manager would help us manage all of our non-utility capital projects. So streets maintenance, sidewalk maintenance, park development projects. Those all get spread out among the existing staff now. A significant amount of that burden falls on Keith Knoll, our Public Works Operations Manager. And it's gotten to be, we're fortunate that we have the money to do a lot of these capital projects, but it sucks up a significant amount of his time. And he does a great job of delegating to his team, but bringing in a capital projects manager dedicated to oversee those would free him up to go back to some of his primary core responsibilities as Public Works Operations Manager. And he could also answer email more than about 30 minutes a day, which I think he would really appreciate. We have a part-time records clerk included to help us both clean up old records and taking some of those, making sure that they're stored properly, digitizing them, and then also doing some ongoing digitization of our town records. We have a fairly significant effort underway, and having a part-time records clerk that only focused on cleaning those up would be a significant benefit to us as well. And then we have an additional community impact deputy in the sheriff contract that is being proposed. That community impact deputy does a lot of things, but traffic is one of the significant ones, traffic enforcement. And so that's something we hear a lot of concerns about. so traffic, and then also kind of crime monitoring and other things. The existing community impact deputy we have has done a fantastic job, and having two would be a great addition.
Just a real quick question on that. Were there any positions that you or maybe department managers hesitated to put on this list? You know, I just don't want anybody feeling understaffed or spread thin. Just, you know,
No, this generally represents every request that our department heads made. The caveat being the sheriff contract, which I'll show you here. We talked about a couple of additional deputies to add to the squad. Sergeant Williamson, our police chief, as we talked about it, he really felt like that was looking forward, but maybe not necessary today. And so as we talked through it and the added expense, we thought, let's try to add those, maybe one or two a year in the coming years. We added a position last year. We're recommending that we add a position this year, and perhaps we can add one or two positions next year. He felt like they're keeping up. I mean, I think the reality of policing in every community is that you never have enough, or it feels like that, but I think they're doing a fantastic job. I think they feel like they're well supported and they're well staffed. This additional community impact deputy was a priority for Sergeant Williamson. I think it's a priority for us as a town. So we feel like that makes sense to add. And then again, we'll work on in the next couple of years, adding maybe one a year for the next 2 years, knowing that that was a little bit of a look ahead anyway, that we need to continue to keep up and we don't want to get behind. We're doing fine now. So that request was 2 for this year, but he felt like it was okay to not include those. I don't think we cut anything else out from a personnel standpoint, did we, Cindy? I think that represents everyone's requests. And so I was happy that based on what our departments felt like they needed, we felt like we could afford. So that's always a good thing. On the kind of the projects and processes, this is kind of a long list. The other funds only have 2 or 3 items on each of them, but I'll talk through these briefly. There is the possibility of a special election next year. We always try to include some money for elections anyways, because you just never know when that might occur. In this case, it may or may not be a DDA election, depending on how that current committee sorts itself out and whether or not the board wants to pursue an election for the formation of a DDA. I think there's good reasons to do that. I think there may be some good reasons not to, and we'll dive into that more in the future, but we wanted to include some money for a possible election if that was necessary. If we don't end up needing an election, then that money will just go back into reserves at the end of the year. We're already underway on a sustainability master plan that you approved a contract for, so some of those expenses will get carried over into next year. The total cost of that is $66,000. We think we'll spend about $20,000 this year under the existing budget that we have, and we've added some money next year to cover the remainder of that project. The possible removal of the old streets building on 2nd and Welch, again, we've been looking at concepts for the redevelopment of 2nd and Welch, or 2nd and Mountain, the old streets building, the skate park. We had previously budgeted to remove that building on the south side of the property. It is a vandalism target and it has some serious structural deficiencies. We may or may not want to remove it, but if we do, we wanted to include a little bit of money in there to do that. So there's $25,000 budgeted there. That's one of those ones we may not end up spending that money. It would go back into reserves at the end of the year if we don't. Tablets for the Planning Commission, and again, these aren't necessarily major expenses. This is only $3,500, but this is outside of the norm for us, so I'm highlighting it here. If you have any questions about kind of just our regular ongoing operational expenses, I'm happy to cover those as well, but just trying to cover the highlights tonight. Our housing needs assessment, again, that's something that's already underway. That project will carry into next year, so we'll continue with some additional funding for next year. We have an existing GIS coordinator, Nathan Gabbard. He's awesome. He has updated, worked with our utility departments to update all of our geographic information systems. So those are computerized mapping databases that geolocate all the infrastructure that we own to within a very small degree so that we can find infrastructure when we need to in the field. It also helps us for modeling and infrastructure development plans and other things. We want to expand the use of our GIS systems to both support our code enforcement, to support our planning community development departments. He can expand those with an expanded license of that software and some development there, including a drone for some new aerial imaging. So there's some it's kind of a unique tool. It's something we've lived without, we probably could live without, but it could also really help us do things a little more efficiently and have some really amazing records for future staff and future boards of our infrastructure. Additional crosswalk lights. We had money budgeted this year. We've ordered those crosswalk lights. We're waiting for them to come in. A little bit of a long lead time. We hope those will be installed before the end of the year, maybe early 2025. We assume, and we already have a list of a couple of other locations in town we might want to install those. So we've included some money for additional crosswalk lights, the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, or the blinky lights, as they're affectionately referred to. And then we have some expenses, a new streets truck for additional staff, a new mini excavator. The mini excavator will get primarily used at the cemetery, but it'll get used in other places in town, especially in tight spots where a larger excavator is very difficult to navigate or to operate. If you can imagine driving a large excavator around the cemetery to do some of the digging that's necessary, that could be a real challenge. That's a real challenge for our crews sometimes. So a mini X will really help with that. We've reduced the scope of the 3rd Street Massachusetts improvements. We still have money included here because I know when we talked about the Sunoco building purchase the first time, we talked about reprogramming those ARPA funds to get that building bought, but that we didn't want to lose sight of some of the other work that we've done from a design perspective on 3rd Massachusetts. Those design plans are almost complete. We're kind of working through some railroad-related issues with stormwater. But when those are done, we want to still be able to do some of those improvements. So we've included a little bit of a reduced scope, maybe not the full 3rd and Massachusetts vision, but maybe improvements to 3rd, some area in front of the depot and the grain elevator and some enhancements to the park, Railroad Park on 3rd Street. The downtown building renovation, we've already talked about that. That's the Sunoco building. And then 3 new public art projects. That was one of your strategic plan items to enhance the community through additional public art. So we budgeted $50,000 each for 3 of those, a total of $150,000 to do some public art projects. And I think, it could be 20 and 80 and 50 or, 60, 60 and 30, but we're kind of estimating 50, 50 and 50 for now. That could be a combination of murals or sculpture work. We have some other really creative ideas, I think, that we'll bring to you after the first of the year. And we'll do a request for proposals from artists with their ideas that we can then pay them to refine and then ultimately select 3 different projects. So we're excited about that opportunity as well. And then lastly, just some other notes. There is a decrease in our cost for animal control. That's not because we're reducing services, it's because we're sharing costs among a couple of different municipalities, and Wellington has come on board, and so our total cost has come down as we spread the cost of some animal control officers through the Humane Society across those different communities. But that's been a really great contract for us. I hate to say this, but we used to have police and code enforcement that were picking up dogs and cats, and then we'd try to house them in town hall or take them out to other places. It was not a great situation. So that animal control contract has been a great addition, and we're happy to see that cost come down but keep the same service. And then we are starting to transition away from contract engineering services to an internal engineering department. Our engineering services are close to $1 million a year and exceed that in some years, both to support our own capital projects and then also to do development review. So we do have a new development review engineer on board. You met him a couple of weeks ago, Luke Siebert. We're really excited to have him on the team. And we want to continue to expand that department. As we do, those contract expenses will come down and our own personnel expenses will go up, but they won't have a divided focus. They will only work for us and not for other clients. They'll build some institutional knowledge that I think is super valuable, especially when we're talking about infrastructure development.
You obviously believe the workload is there.
And the workload is significantly there.
Okay.
What we're currently spending on engineering, we will still have some contract engineering expenses. We won't do a lot of design work in-house. But project management, development review, construction inspection and observation, all those things we've covered in that engineering department. It'd be great to have those back in-house. So we're excited about that. So again, this is the general fund in summary. So this goes back to that $13.2 million in expected revenue. The expenses here, we've just categorized into some broad categories, so you can see that personnel, and I think this is true of every business, people is typically the biggest expense. Facilities and equipment, processes and services, and then priority projects. Those priority projects, again, just between the Sunoco building and the 3rd Street in Massachusetts project, those two discretionary projects is about $6 million. So what we have currently budgeted. And then the rest of that $500,000 spread across a couple of other items in that general fund capital department.
Is there one item that contributed to the essentially 50% decrease in revenue?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Trustee Wing. I meant to bring that up. The big decrease in revenue is actually, so last year we transferred in money from other departments to pay for town park. So all the expenses for town park got accounted for in the general fund, but it got paid for by several different funds. So we took millions of dollars out of those other funds, put them into the general fund to pay for the expenses associated with town park out of one account, if you want to look at it that way. So if you look back at 2023, that's actually a more realistic kind of revenue projection. And oftentimes where you'll see larger revenue fluctuations too is if we have a grant. So when we get to the BATS fund, you'll see typically the revenue associated with BATS is very small. And then next year we're projecting $1 million. Well, that's because 850,000 of that is coming from a grant from the federal government. So sometimes you'll see big spikes in revenue associated with grants. Most of our revenue is pretty steady. Our fees for service, if we're in a severe drought condition, you would expect water fees to drop. If we're in a severe economic recession, you would expect to see sales taxes drop. But for the most part, they're pretty steady and they generally grow both with inflation and population over time. Any questions about the general fund? If anybody needs a break at any point, feel free to stop me. I think I've already been talking for almost 40 minutes, so I may need a break in a second.
Actually, quick question for Sergeant Williamson. What does the community impact deputy entail duties?
So the community impact deputies focus on community issues. Right now, from 2025, my focus for them is going to be traffic and then community oriented policing projects. Where we see issues coming up, where we have vehicle trespasses, I can send the deputies to go deal with those, have them specifically target those crimes, investigate them, and then try to arrest the suspects for those. This year, Zach Anderson, our current community impact deputy, has done an outstanding job for us. He's wrapping up a case where he's going to file 25 separate felony cases on one suspect, 5 of those being victims here in Berthoud. So he's done an outstanding job. Over $250,000 worth of property recovered in that case. So those are the type of things we can do with our community impact deputy, solve crimes that are affecting our community.
Perfect, thank you.
It's great to have some deputies that they can kind of specially focus on hot button issues rather than just responding to calls, right? 911 calls.
You need a break?
No, I'm good for now if you guys are okay. I may grab a glass of water actually though. So. Thank you, Alicia. Should have thought to do this before I started talking for an hour and a half. Okay, so our enterprise funds, again, these are the kind of business type activities that we have, water, wastewater, and stormwater. There are both operational funds, excuse me, within these special funds, and there are capital funds. The operational funds are the revenues driven by fees for service, and the capital funds are driven by one-time fees paid at building permit typically for expansion of our systems. Director Ken Matthews is here tonight. If you have any real specific questions, I know he gave a great presentation just a month ago about all the different capital projects that we have underway and the utility funds. But if you have more questions about that, he's here and can address some of those. The source of supply fund, fund number 20, that is our raw water fund. We do not pay for personnel from that. The revenues that we receive in source of supply are one-time revenues paid by building and development to expand our water portfolio. So that cash in lieu fee that we talked about in our last water study session, that $25,000 per single family equivalent that gets paid on every building permit in town goes into this fund, and then we use that money to expand and develop our raw water resources. We do have some contract expenses in this fund. Those are our water attorney and our water engineer at LRE, who you met during that water study session as well. Pete and
Andrew.
Andrew, thank you. From a expense standpoint, again, we do have a couple of projects. We're continuing work on new storage facilities, primarily for our Windy Gap water that we own. And so there are expenses associated with the work necessary to do that. We do want to buy another ultrasonic algae unit. That goes in our raw water reservoir at Berthoud Reservoir. That ultrasonic unit helps to disrupt the algae growth cycle and try to limit some of the taste and odor issues that you get with surface water that sits in a holding pond like Berthoud Reservoir. We do have ongoing updates to the raw water master plan, so that's primarily engineering related expenses, but to update those semi-annually or twice a year, that we can bring then that update like we just did a month or so ago to give you a snapshot of where we're at from a raw water standpoint. And then every year we budget several $1 million. This year we have $6 million for additional water purchases. Again, these are one-time revenues for one-time expenses. That's generally the idea. And again, to go out and buy additional raw water, CBT, Windy Gap, Handy Ditch, all those different water sources that we already own, continuing to expand our water portfolio. Again, $6 million of the expense there is budgeted for water purchases. We don't have $6 million of water purchases already underway, but we want to have that budget available if and when those purchase opportunities present themselves. You can see the source of supply carries a fairly significant balance. It's been as high as $30 million, and it's but at least as long as I've been here, it hasn't really been below 10. So there's a healthy bank to continue to buy and develop our raw water resources.
Quick question on that. I believe this is true, but speaking of the opportunistic, water acquisitions, I feel like this fund has helped us secure some open space that has popped up because it has come with water, and so we're not, subject to just using the 1% funds. We can also lean on this to kind of make the transaction happen.
That is true, and so oftentimes with farmland in particular, a significant portion of the value of that, of those acquisitions is actually the water rights associated with them. I wouldn't always buy water rights with the sources of supply fund because if the goal is to leave them on the property and not use them in our water operations, then I think there's some reasons to purchase those with open space funds, not water funds, because these are really intended to expand our raw water resource portfolio, primarily to offset the impact of new development. But part of that is still providing water for parks and open spaces. And so, there's a balance there, right? Part of what we collect here is to collect enough water to water future parks as well, not just to water lawns and new developments. But that's a long way of saying, you're right, we have used this fund to help support some of those open space acquisitions where we've been buying really high priority water rights that we can use in our system in really meaningful ways in the future, while still keeping water on those farms. So the next fund, fund number 21, that is our water operations fund.
Mayor Pro Tem.
That's our water business.
Oh, no,
Sorry, Trustee Murphy, Mayor Pro Tem Murphy. Yep.
Continue, I'm good.
This is our water operations fund. The significant majority of the revenue in this fund comes from user fees that you pay in your monthly water bill. We have 10 full-time employees. They're not fully budgeted in water because a lot of our staff in our utility department spend time in both water and wastewater, but the majority of their expense is budgeted in water because the majority of their time is spent on water distribution, water treatment and distribution. We are recommending that we hire a deputy director of utilities to support Ken in his efforts, who be focused almost exclusively or exclusively on operations, overseeing our treatment operations and our distribution and collections. That time would again be split between water and wastewater, but would take some of the day-to-day operational demands off of Ken. As you know, we have a long, very expensive list of capital projects. We have some major water resources projects, and that will allow him to focus his time a little bit more there. And also bringing in a water resources manager to handle acquisitions, water resources development, and then there's a lot of paper moving of water that occurs to use water at the right time, to interact with the river commissioner and Northern Water and ditch companies and other things. It would be great if it was as easy as like the water's sitting there and when we need it, we turn a valve open and the water shows up at the plant. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of moving water around. A lot of that happens on paper, but it's a fairly significant management effort. So supporting that with a water resources manager, and then again, one new full-time utility operator to support distribution and collections. Trustees?
Is there any way to quantify a monetary benefit? Like, do any of these positions you're bringing up, do any of them pay for themselves?
So, no.
That's okay. I mean, you need what you need. I was just.
Yeah, so they won't generate new revenue.
Okay.
They will allow us to dedicate time to things that are not being done now. So in some ways, there's some opportunity costs that we're paying for. There are missed opportunities because we don't have enough staffing in our water and wastewater divisions to tackle everything we have underway. And a lot of that's recent development, right? I mean, we have, again, these very large capital projects. We have some very large water deals we've been working on. And so bringing in staff to help support those efforts will allow us to continue to keep our departments moving forward, but they won't generate new revenue if you want to look at it that way.
And one just related question, and I don't need to answer right now, but is there any kind of town standard that headcount cost should be 2.5% of revenue? Is there any like norm out there that in government there's something that, you know, towns, cities strive for, or not really?
No, it's interesting. So there's not a lot of benchmarks between communities. I think there are some. I mean, you can still kind of test yourself against others. But I mean, even when you look at like water rates is a good example. That's really more of like a fee for service. But I think it's applicable to even our expenses. Every water system is totally unique. The number of miles of pipe, the types of treatment that occur, you know, the peaking demands versus kind of base demand, and all these different things. Every system is very different. And so sometimes people will say, well, hey, X community, their water rates are 25% less than ours. Well, I can point to other communities that have 25% higher rates than we do. And it's because their systems are different. They have different demands. They have different operational needs. Maybe their power is more expensive in that community than it is here, or vice versa, and all of those things. And so the same is really true when you talk about expenses. I think there's some kind of reasonableness tests that you can do, but there's not a really clear benchmark.
Okay, thank you.
On the kind of project processes or equipment side of things, there's a major upgrade to SCADA, or Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. That's kind of our the computerized management of our treatment and distribution systems. You can see the whole plant running on a computer screen and adjust valves and pumps and other things. That's a very important part of our system, and it needs some upgrades. Backflow management software upgrade, managing all the backflows in town. As you know, we had a cross-connection event this year. I don't know that this software would have solved that problem, but managing our backflow system is really important.
Was there ever a resolution to that?
There was. Those folks were cited and brought to municipal court and paid some pretty heavy fines for that. The public health department did do an analysis. They didn't find any evidence that any contamination made anyone sick, so that was a big plus. and our crew went through and inspected every single property that was on that non-potable system to make sure that there weren't any other cross connections. We've been working on an automated meter pilot project. Half of that is also budgeted in water capital. And that's to be able to remotely read and monitor meters. We've got 5,000 estimated linear feet of pipe replacement. As you can imagine, these systems get old and the distribution and collection systems start to fail. And so having an active ongoing schedule for replacement, it's no different than repaving roads on a regular basis to make sure that they don't fall apart. We want to do the same thing in our water and wastewater funds. We've got capacity upgrades at our water plant that we need to work on, that Ken talked to you about previously, a new vehicle to support the new staff that we're recommending, and then some valve maintenance equipment. One of the interesting challenges of operating a water distribution system is that if you don't exercise and maintain valves properly, then when you need to go shut them off, oftentimes they don't shut down all the way. And so we are working diligently to build a better valve exercising and maintenance program so that when we do have breaks that inevitably occur, that we know where those valves are at, that they've been regularly exercised and maintained, they could be shut down, and that repairs can be made quickly. The repair that we did over by on 5th Street just a month or so ago, that was a challenging project where I don't think that line was ever fully shut down.
It was still running slowly, but we had to take not quite 100 homes offline in order to be able to get it down to the point where we can work on it.
So making sure that all those valves are operational and properly maintained is really critical to the ongoing health of the system. And in summary, again, we have a significant number of capital projects, one-time expenses budgeted in the operating fund. But the typical personnel, facilities and equipment kind of processes and services that we provide are covered by our ongoing revenues. Water capital, now again, the capital funds, anytime you see capital, those are one-time fees collected at building permit, and they're intended to offset or mitigate the impact of new development on the system, either by expansion of treatment plants, expansion of sewer lines. On the road impact or road capital funds, you'll see expansion of roadways or intersection improvements to make sure the traffic functions even as the community grows. That's what these are generally for. The Bacon Lake transmission main is the biggest expense here. This is a large transmission main running along the east side of 1st Street that we've talked about previously again. But to enhance both the reliability and redundancy of our system, but also to offset impacts of growth. It will also then create opportunity for additional growth in the future as appropriate and as approved by the town. One thing I've neglected to mention at the beginning, the budget that you see in your packet includes some future year expenses. You'll see that we have budgets out for several years into the future. You are not approving those. When you approve the budget, you're only approving one fiscal year. We do that so that we can check and see, are we trending in a negative or a positive direction? When we see that as we look out in 3-5 years in the future, that total fund balances are declining, then we know we have a structural problem that we need to fix. But a lot of times those are rough estimates, right? Anywhere we know we have some expenses associated with capital projects and we have a really solid idea of what those look like, we will plug those in so we can see what that does to the ending fund balances in future years. But I don't know that we've ever, the one thing I can guarantee about the budget is that we will be wrong. And the question is just how wrong are we? In general, we've always been wrong in the good way. We've always collected more revenue and spent less than we planned. But we're never 100% spot on.
So it would be safe to say that if the fund balances got close to zero, our capital expenditures would become much more conservative?
100%. In fact, when we did our initial financial projections based on our capital, what we think are our expected capital needs, it put these funds into deficits in future years. And so we talked about we sat down and looked at both what is the scope of these projects, and then which of these need to be done now and which of these want to be done now, and how can we stagger these expenses in ways that don't create future year deficits. So, yeah. And so water capital, you can see, maintains a healthy ending fund balance based on what we think is expected future revenue and current year expense, but we do have some big capital demands in the coming years that will bring this balance down. But again, that's what these one-time fees are collected for. Okay, wastewater operations. Now we're transitioning away from water to wastewater. This is our ongoing operational expenses for wastewater treatment and collection. Again, we have roughly 10 full-time employees budgeted between the two funds. Roughly 2/3 of that is in water and 1/3 of that is in wastewater. That's not exact, but that's just for round numbers for easy understanding. And then we do have seasonal positions budgeted here. Again, this is not an additional position here. This is just identifying that we would have some expense associated with the Deputy Director of Utilities that we already talked about that would be budgeted here in this fund. Not the entire expense of that employee, but a portion of, as well as that utility operator. The water resources manager has no real direct impact on wastewater, and so 100% of that position will be funded out of the water operations, not a portion, no portion of that would come from wastewater, if that makes sense. Again, upgrades to SCADA systems, video inspection equipment, that we can run cameras up sewer lines and see their condition and find deficiencies. Upgraded pumps and backup power at some of our lift stations. There are ongoing challenges. The Campion lift station in particular is an old lift station that was part of a county development that the town took ownership of. It has some significant deficiencies. And so trying to shore some of those up so they don't become operational problems in the coming year. And then treatment plant improvements. Phase 1AA, if you remember, Savannah kind of joked about the nomenclature for project, but Phase 1AA is underway. I think I have that right. Yep. And so there's some equipment purchases associated with that. That's to improve some operational needs at the wastewater treatment plant or the water reclamation facility, same thing. And then we do have some money budgeted for Phase 1A in this fiscal year as well, knowing that project will likely continue into 2026. And again, capital projects are a significant portion of the expense. You can see that the ending fund balance does drop here, but much of our future capital demands are going to be to create new capacity, and so they won't come out of this fund. A lot of the big capital needs that we have now are to deal with existing regulatory issues and to kind of set the stage for future capacity improvements. And again, those capacity improvements will come from wastewater capital, which is the next fund here. Oops, backwards. Wastewater capital is actually Fund 24, not 2. Sorry, I missed a 4 there. There are no personnel expenses in the capital fund. That's true of really all of our capital funds. So I highlight that each time, but just know that if we're collecting one-time revenues for capital expansion or capital projects, we don't pay for people with those one-time revenues. On the wastewater side, we have the Bacon Lake Interceptor running parallel to that Bacon Lake transmission main. That will shore up deficiencies that we have on the existing First Street transmission main and also create additional capacity in the system. We need to expand the collection line on Berthoud Parkway. There are some restrictions there that have caused some artificial restrictions in the capacity of that line that we need to replace and increase capacity along Berthoud Parkway. And then again, treatment plant improvements for future years. When you see the Alpha Line reimbursement in wastewater, I just wanted to highlight here, this is an ongoing expense. There is an Alpha Line fee that is paid on properties that are tributary to what we call the Alpha Line that was installed by a developer many years ago. And that agreement with the developer was that all these properties that are tributary to that line will pay a fee to the town, and then we remit that fee back to the developer for the expenses he had in installing that line until that line is paid off. So we have You will see in the revenue side of the wastewater capital, you'll see alpha line fee, and then you'll see an expense that is equal to that for the fee reimbursement. So that's just a straight in and out. We don't keep any portion of that. It gets paid by development, that goes right to the developer that paid for that sewer line.
Can I ask who the developer is?
I honestly don't know his name.
Okay.
I've read that contract. We actually have an alpha line.
A disaster. I'm glad we
We would not enter into a contract like that today. There is an alpha water line as well that the board authorized us to pay off this year. Once West Side Crossing tied into it, there was a small amount. That's a long and sordid tale that I won't get into tonight. You guys already approved that expense last year. But yeah.
That's good, thanks.
And so again, there's some significant expenditures here, but these are one-time revenues collected for one-time expenses to expand our systems. So you would expect to see periodically some really large expenses that would draw those balances down. Stormwater capital, again, stormwater capital fees to enhance and expand our stormwater management systems in town. One of those, no personnel expenses in this capital fund again. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but hopefully that will make sense. The Berthoud Reservoir stormwater outfall is an improvement to literally to the outfall of Berthoud Reservoir that discharges water from the reservoir that comes into the reservoir via stormwater, and that discharges and releases and ultimately ends up back in the Little Thompson River. But we need to improve and expand that stormwater outfall. We have some drainage improvements that we've been trying to work through with the Serenity Ridge development on the east end of town. As new development has occurred in that subdivision over the last several years, new impervious surface has been created, and so there's more stormwater runoff. And it's all getting concentrated into really one stormwater pathway. And in major storm events, it's like a raging river through the drainage channels in their front yards. It doesn't overtop, it hasn't flooded homes, but it causes scouring and erosion, and it's, there are folks who have landscaped those areas probably in ways they shouldn't have, but it destroys that landscaping. And so we're trying to work with them to create a secondary path for some of that stormwater, take some of that concentration out of that flow. We run into some setbacks with the HOA, who we think has some expense associated with this they don't want to fund yet. And so we don't think it's not a flooding risk. It could be if some of the driveway culverts got blocked and those kinds of things, because if you haven't seen it, you probably haven't. But it's in a major storm event, there's a lot of water flowing through those roadside ditches in that subdivision. And then we have a stormwater ditch crossing on County Road 14, kind of close to just east of the Heron Point Apartments that needs to be expanded. That's a project that the county is actually, it's their bridge, but the need for the expansion is driven by development in town, and so we're going to help to fund that. They're funding a significant portion of it. We're going to fund about 60% of the cost of that project. The Berthoud Reservoir stormwater outfall and the expansion of that culvert near Heron Point are the two major expenses there. And actually, we just got expenses from the county in the last week that we expect to spend much less than what we had planned here, so that's a good thing, but we included what we thought was going to be the amount. I think it's going to end up being about half of what we planned. And then on the operational side, most of our stormwater operations is managing and maintaining detention ponds that the town owns and drainage channels, but the majority of the expenses associated with street sweeping. And so people don't often think about streets. I think people think street sweeping is really just for the aesthetics, and it is nice when streets are swept and they're clean, they look great. The real reason why we sweep streets is to keep all that debris out of the storm sewer system and out of the river. So most of the expense in stormwater operations is associated with street sweeping. And you can see here we have, we don't pay for personnel out of here, even though we probably could. We know somebody drives the street sweeper, but we cover their expense in the general fund and our streets department, but this pays for equipment associated with those operations. Okay, so that's our enterprise funds. I'll stop again if anybody feels like they need a break or a caffeinated beverage.
You guys, are we gung ho on going?
I could take a break.
Let's take a 5-minute break.
Very good. to get the video rolling back again, so we have all that for the record. We can do like the countdown like on TV where you.
Yeah. Audience clapping.
And go.
I look like I'm really angry, it's because I didn't have my glasses, so that's why I'm like squinting. It's true, I'm like looking.
Do you need some?
We probably don't have the same prescription.
Do you just
Oh,
need like cheaters, like magnifiers?
Do you have some?
Of course.
Give it a shot. Can't hurt, right? Thank you, sir.
It's always worth a shot.
Put it in the budget, Mayor.
Yeah. Mayor vision.
We need a
Mayor
stash
optics.
of, we need a stash of cheaters up there.
Thank you.
Okay, so special funds. As we talked about, these are funds that are restricted for a specific purpose that are not associated with our enterprise funds. So we do have some special funds, those capital funds in our utility enterprises that are restricted for capital expansion. These are special funds independent of those and the general fund that have specific requirements for what they can be spent on. The first in the budget is park development. It's exactly what it sounds like. These are one-time fees collected for new development to expand our park systems or to add new amenities or improvements to our existing parks. So we want to add an entry monument sign at the bike park, one at Town Park. We have the North Berthoud Parkway Trail. You approved that construction project already, but that will go from Water Avenue up to 10E on the west side of the road. And then a portion of the construction expense for the Arboretum is included in the Park Development Fund. So we are budgeting $7.5 million in total for the construction of the Arboretum in 2025. And that is spread out across a couple of different funds based on our prior parks conversations. $1.5 million of that is included here in the Park Development budget. And you can see we would expect to bring in some additional revenue. Again, that's all driven by new residential development. Commercial development doesn't pay park development fees because commercial businesses don't create impacts on parks directly. So residential development pays park development fees. We spend those again on these kind of one-time capital projects. Parkland acquisition, again, exactly what it sounds like. This is to expand our parkland inventory. No personnel funds are included in here either, or really any of these special funds, because again, they're restricted primarily for building new stuff. We have a portion of the expense for the acquisition of the Shaw Farm. That's that County Road 5 property that we are going to talk about after our budget discussion tonight briefly. And then a portion of expense for the acquisition of the additional Wagner property from the school district. So if you'll recall, we talked about there's a piece between Wagner Farm and the Arboretum and the Turner Middle School football field. There's empty land that the school district owns that we're working with them to acquire. So there's some surveying expenses in there and the acquisition costs and then the direct costs associated with purchasing the land from the district. And so you can see here, we expect a little bit of revenue. The fee associated for parkland is much smaller, $750 per house than our park development. We expect to collect about $265,000 there, and then again, some significant larger expenses for some of those big property acquisitions. And you can see from prior years, we don't buy a lot of parkland. It doesn't happen every year. We've been fortunate the last couple of years to have some good acquisitions. Most of this is supported other people's larger open space acquisitions. Fund 33 is our public facilities fund. Again, no personnel, collected from new development to expand public facilities like town hall or our public works facilities. This can also pay for vehicles like public works trucks or police cars. And so that's what you'll see here. We have some money budgeted for the potential land acquisition for a new public works facility. Our existing public works crews are spread out among several different facilities. We have materials and equipment stored on First Street. We have parks and open space staff members all jammed into our parks building over by Vine Park by the high school on 10th Street. We have significantly outgrown that space. We have our streets crew up by the water plant. And then we have equipment stored at the Jaskowski property for our forestry and open space division as well. So we're kind of spread out all over town. We'd like to consolidate and build a real facility for those crews where they can all be housed under one roof. We've already done some conceptual building designs to kind of estimate how much space do we really need. And so that's kind of set the stage. Now we're looking at and evaluating a couple of different sites around town for the potential expansion of Public Works facility. It is possible we could do that in our own property, but the properties that we own have some significant limitations to them that we'll come and talk to you about in the future. But just know that that's kind of where we're heading or what we're thinking there.
Is that something we could repurpose the Jakowski barn for? Use the conservation easement.
The conservation easement would effectively prohibit what we would need to do out there. And the other problem with the Jaskowski property is it's the far edge of town. It's the farthest kind of from everywhere else that you could locate. And so it's just not a real efficient place to put all of our crews that are kind of running all over town, especially as the town continues to expand to the east. That would be at the far northwest corner. So we'd like to pick somewhere that we think is central to where the town will be and grow in the next 20 years, if that makes sense. We are completing the design, the initial concept designs for the expansion of this building. We have some initial floor plans we've looked at and some concept renderings that we'll bring to you early next year to kind of show you what that could look like, expanding to the south where the existing bank drive-throughs are. We have to negotiate a deal with them to do that, but we already own that land, and it would be a much less expensive place to expand administrative space, including like new board chambers, new admin offices. The sheriff's department could take over our existing admin offices because they're jammed in a very small space in the back of town hall. So you'll see that coming to you in early 2025, but budgeting money to complete those designs. And then additional vehicles, like I mentioned, this can pay for vehicles for our staff.
You ever considered pool cars where multiple departments can share them, or is the need there for the engineering they would use that car all the time?
Yeah, so that one would primarily be used by our construction observer. So we have a construction observer budgeted that we haven't been able to hire yet, but we expect to hire soon. And that person will be in the field every single day.
Okay.
So they need a dedicated vehicle. We
Got
do have pool cars at town hall though, for the other administrative staff, if they're going to meetings or if they're going out in the field for something. We do have a couple of vehicles here at town hall. And then we do have vehicles in our parks and public works, utilities divisions that are kind of special purpose. And so sometimes those will get used in the summer by seasonals. And then other times they're specific need vehicles. They don't get driven every day. But otherwise, mostly everybody else has an assigned vehicle. They're tooled for the kind of jobs that they typically do.
And then when they get X number of years old or X number of miles, I assume sell them, and I don't know if we do that internally or.
We typically trade them in when we buy new vehicles, so we don't sell them outright on the market. A lot of these fleet trucks don't have a great market value or they're hard to sell. We do have vehicles in our fleet that are 10 plus years old. And so if they're still operating well, and you know, the beauty of being in a small town is that even trucks that are driven every single day might only get driven 6 miles.
Sure. We're
not driving, you know, across Fort Collins. And so a lot of our vehicles are pretty low mileage, and so they can last a pretty long time.
Great.
We'll wear them out before we buy new ones, typically. So again, this is our summary for the public facilities fee, and $1.5 million of that priority project would be budgeted for land acquisition for public works facility. Again, I think there may be some opportunities to use land we already have, and there's some other creative kind of partnership arrangements we've considered. But if we just look at the amount of space that we think we need and the cost per acre that we know exists in town based on several recent acquisitions, that's where we're getting that $1.5 million from. The Conservation Trust Fund. This one is kind of a unique one. We get some funding in this, a couple $100,000 through the Conservation Trust statewide. And we pay for our forestry and open space staff and their activities in this fund. The money that we receive from Conservation Trust doesn't cover even a significant portion of it. It covers a minor portion of the expense. And so a significant amount of the revenue in this fund is a transfer from the general fund to help pay for forestry and open space staff. But their activities, the things that forestry and open space do, are the eligible activities, are primarily the eligible activities that we can spend that conservation trust money on, so it's just easy to account for all of it here. And so their operations are here. We've got 6 full-time staff members between forestry and open space management. And they do a whole variety of different things, so they don't just manage the urban forest, although that's a significant portion of the forestry team's job. And they don't just mow native grasses as part of open space management. They plow trails in the wintertime and parking lots, and they have a whole variety of different things that they work on. They do some horticulture work. So they're kind of spread around town. They do have money budgeted for a new plow, for a new truck. One of the bigger trucks that they use to plow is tough in some tight spaces, and so a new plow and new software for maintaining our own tree inventory locally. So we have a online tree database. It's really cool. There's thousands of trees identified in town, all over town. You can see on a map, but we don't own the software and all the data, so we want all that internally. We don't want it with a different entity.
Chris?
Yes.
Could you go through the breakdown of those staff members?
So we have 3 in forestry and 3 in open space, I think is right. Is that right, Cindy? 3 in forestry and 3 in open space. So we have our town forester, 2 forestry techs, and then open space, and 3 open space technicians.
Okay.
Again, in summary here, revenue expenses, we have a couple of forestry and parks projects. These are discretionary. If over time, you can see a decreasing balance here. If over time we start to feel like there's some real significant challenges associated with maintaining a healthy balance, we can eliminate some of those discretionary expenses in the future. When you look at 2024 versus 2025, that general parks project, $450,000 of that 500 in that general parks project line item was the Arboretum design. Designing an urban forest came out of this fund. The expense of construction, though, will not come from this fund. That's why you don't see that carried over. Larimer County Open Space Fund. We get some money through the Larimer County Open Space Tax, and then we also transfer money into this fund for our own open space acquisitions. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to it on my other screen. And we use this fund primarily to do trail system and improvements. We've used it for some park expenses, which are eligible expenses, but where we're focusing the majority of the dollars now is on open space acquisition itself. For the last several years, we've been budgeting money that we carry over each year for open space acquisition, and this will help support some improvements to our open spaces, but then also open space acquisitions like the Shaw Farm, the Wagner property, and the Larimer County open space that we talked about tonight. So we do have some money included in this budget that we can spend on that Larimer County open space request. I'll show you in just a second. In summary, we have some existing fund balance, so if the board was interested in supporting with the $200,000 ask that the county had, that's fine. We included $150 from a budgeting perspective. I think either are fine, and they both support our goals of increasing open space in the Berthoud area and helps to strengthen our partnership. In some ways, it's kind of nice to be able to contribute the same amount the city of Loveland did. So we can brag about that when we go to our regional meetings. The improvements to the boardwalk at Hillsdale Park, there are some wooden boardwalks through the kind of marshland there. There's some improvements that need to be made there, and the cedar will pay for itself in a couple of years. Maybe in 1 year, depending on how much we might normally need to reseed in our open spaces, but definitely in 2. So we think that's a good buy, and it'll allow our staff to do some smaller.
Versus contracting that out.
Versus contracting it out.
Gotcha.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I should have
makes
been
sense.
clear about that. We won't do like we wouldn't reseed the whole bike park with this, but native grasses can be temperamental, and so if we lose some at Wagner, we can go through and do, you know, a half acre, an acre of reseeding with this equipment ourselves rather than contracting it out. Where you see significant revenue, and you'll see that on the next slide, a big chunk of that is expected grant revenue from GOCO for our open space acquisition on Weld County Road 5. And then also a transfer from Parkland Dedication Fund and the transfer from the 1998 1% fund, all again associated with some large open space acquisitions.
I haven't heard you mention reserves much, and they're built into all these funds now that you're talking about. And is that a contingency, or is that to help the balance out?
So when you look at the ending fund balance, when I say reserves, I'm talking about the ending fund balance. So we don't set reserves aside in a separate account. They just live within this account. So the Larimer County open space budget, for instance, we would project the ending fund balance to be a little over $1.5 million.
Yeah, but it has has a revenue and it has expenditure, then it has reserves, which is.
Oh, yeah, so we do have a minimum emergency reserve.
Okay.
That is 3% of the expenses.
Is that self-imposed, is that law, or?
3% of the revenue, sorry.
Is that dictated?
That's statutory.
Okay,
So
okay.
in the general fund, we try to maintain 15% as our kind of policy reserve. We have significantly more than that in reserves, but the emergency reserve is statutory.
Now that I see them, they're just not labeled. See that little
They are
one
not.
on?
Yeah, that's that little number there.
Yep, okay.
I think that's right.
It is.
I think they were labeled on others.
I think they were labeled on others, so
somewhere, yeah.
maybe we didn't capture that.
No biggie. I just was curious how they.
But yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks.
Cemetery fund, we don't have any new personnel requested here. We do have one full-time cemetery maintenance technician and one seasonal that helps in the summertime. We want to complete the cemetery improvement plans. We showed those concepts to you previously and need to complete those so we kind of know what the vision of the future of this cemetery looks like. We don't have any new equipment budgeted here, but again, we did budget a mini excavator in the general fund. The reason why we don't budget it here is because a significant chunk of the cemetery revenue comes from the general fund anyway via a transfer. So there's a lot of money already coming from the general fund. It's just easier to budget that equipment there because it will get used by our streets and parks and other public works crews as well. The revenue for the cemetery fund, I'll just kind of point out, it comes from lot sales and openings and closings, literally kind of the burial processes, and then marker sales, and then transfer from the general fund. There's not a lot of revenue associated with the cemetery. There is a lot of expense in maintaining it, and that's why the general fund helps to support that activity. BATS is our transit service. We don't have any new personnel requested here. We have one full-time and one part-time, and that's it. 2 drivers or 1.5 drivers if you want to look at that. And then really that one full-time employee, Adam, handles a lot of our paperwork and stuff that are required for reporting. And so if you think about it, you really probably have 1.25 total drivers. The big revenue and the big expense in this fund would be associated with our microtransit pilot program grant through the federal government. So $850,000 in revenue and expense associated with the federal grant, with a small increase in transfer from the 1998 1% fund. One of the things that the 1998 1% fund was approved to pay for was BATS. So we helped supplement the expenses of operating the system with that special tax. RAFT has requested a fairly sizable increase in their support from the town. RAFT provides services, transportation services to seniors and adults with disabilities. They take folks all over northern Colorado, from Berthoud to Longmont, Boulder, as far south as Niwot, as far north as North Fort Collins. They'll drive folks all over the place. They operate what we typically pay for is rides that BATS either can't provide
because we don't have the resources or that are outside of our normal operating hours. Like on the weekends, we don't run bats. And in the evenings, we don't run bats. And so it's kind of a 5-day-a-week service during kind of normal business hours. Raft helps to supplement that, and we've paid them for that in the past. We do have money budgeted for them this year as well, but they've asked for significantly more than what we had paid for previously and what we currently pay for. We've had a meeting with them to kind of talk about that request, and we'd like to refine that a little bit more. I've suggested to them that maybe we could increase slightly from last year, but not to the amount that they're asking for. Their average ride distance is about 19 miles, so you can imagine that's one way. So, you know, they're providing transportation services to a small but definitely needed group of individuals, but well outside of what we would consider our bat service territory. So there's some balance there between, that's not a ride we would provide to anyone, even if it's during normal business hours. We don't drive people to Fort Collins with bats. And so whether or not we should be covering the cost of those, that's a business decision they've made. So we're kind of working through that with them. Just wanted to point that out. And we'll hopefully have that all clarified and finalized when we bring this back to you in December. Again, a significant difference in revenue for 2025. We're expecting that big grant from the feds. Significant difference in expense, again, driven by the expenses associated with microtransit pilot program and some increases in some other service costs. Road Impact Fund, this is another one of those capital funds, no personnel expenses. There's only really one big project here, and that is the Spartan Avenue crossing. So what's holding that up right now is, and that project's been in the works for years. It was being worked on before I started here 7 years ago. We have complete design plans to connect Spartan across the railroad tracks to Nebraska, but on the south end of town. But we're waiting for the state to go through a rulemaking process on operations maintenance agreements with the railroad. That's probably more detailed than we need to get into tonight, but that operation and maintenance agreement has to be agreed to between us and the railroad before they will approve the crossing. But that state rulemaking procedure is underway, and it may have some significant impacts that may be really positive for us if we wait. So that's what we're doing right now. We've been carrying expenses in this fund for several years. And so we keep carrying forward the expense of that crossing, even though we haven't built it yet. The retail marijuana tax, again, we don't pay for personnel here. These revenues are restricted to a fund that can be used for youth activities and services, streets and sidewalk improvements, law enforcement, and parks and rec. So all of these expenses are associated with one of those categories. We do downtown sidewalk replacements. These are sidewalk replacements that are not associated with our road projects. So we pay for sidewalk upgrades adjacent to our road paving projects from a different fund. These are other areas and almost exclusively in downtown. Actually, entirely exclusively within downtown. The flock camera system that's been piloted that I think has had some real success. We've carried some money in this budget to pay for that on an ongoing basis. If that pilot program expires in 2025, those cameras have really helped the community impact deputy in particular and the sheriffs just generally solve a lot of crimes, which has been really, really great. The added LCSO vehicle, the Larimer County Sheriff's Office vehicle that would be included with the contract would get paid for out of this fund. So if we add a community impact deputy, they will need a vehicle, that'll get paid for out of here. Some improvements to the bike park, and then our service contracts for, these are recreational programs or programs that we could provide through our recreation department, but that we do under contract with nonprofits in town. So Wildfire Arts is our arts provider. They provide fine art and music, theater, dance. They do that under contract with us. The Historical Society obviously manages the museum and provides a lot of educational courses and things. A lot of those take place at our rec center. We pay them to do that, as well as some traveling displays and other things. They've asked for a small increase to continue to support their operation, which we're very supportive of. They provide us a great report on their activities for this year, which we'll forward to you via email. And I think that's a great budding partnership that we started last year, or expanded last year. And then Golden Links you approved very recently. Those are for senior recreation trips out of town. That's primarily covering the transportation costs of going on these tours or trips with other seniors. So the retail marijuana tax, we would expect revenue to actually maybe even dip a little bit. We'll see how the Loveland's recent measures that were approved to allow marijuana sales in Loveland, how those impact us. But we do have some money stored away that we'd like to go ahead and use to continue with the existing projects. Then depending on how revenues change in the coming year, we'll likely make some recommended changes to you in coming years. The 1998 1% sales tax, this one again was restricted to very specific uses. Improving streets, purchasing land and building a recreation center, purchase of open space, operation maintenance of bats, and library support, which we no longer operate the library. That's operated by the Berthoud Library District. No personnel are included in here. We do have sidewalk replacements and our 5-year pavement management plan expenses in this account. We have a portion of the Arboretum construction here, which we mentioned before, and a portion of the open space acquisitions that we already talked about.
Does it go into perpetuity, or is there a sunset date?
There is no sunset to this, and there is no sunset to the 2019 1% fund either, which we will talk about next. So again, we are exceeding revenues this year with the idea that those are for property acquisitions and development of the Arboretum one-time discretionary expenses. The ongoing expenses that we have here are related to street and sidewalk improvement. Those are again somewhat discretionary, but we want to continue to be able to invest $1.5 million plus in our streets and sidewalks that we can continue to fund out of the 1998 1% fund. 2019 1% fund, which was approved by voters in 2018 but became effective in 2019, that pays for the recreation center. The recreation center expenses and our recreation staff for that facility and all of our indoor recreation programs, including indoor aquatics, all come from the 2019 1% sales tax fund. We are not requesting new personnel here, but you can see it takes quite a bit to operate that facility. They're doing a fantastic job. We do have some equipment, a hot water pressure washer to help with maintenance. A portion of the Arboretum construction expense is included in here, as well as construction drawings for an outdoor pool at the rec center. So we haven't budgeted the total expense of construction yet because we don't really know what that's going to cost. We have a very broad expense estimate, and that'll all be driven by the scope of the project. It could be anywhere from $4 to $12 million, depending on where we land. We can't afford $12 million, so my expectation is it will be a lot closer to 4 or 5, but we're going to initiate that design contract next week with a kickoff meeting.
Where does the debt for the rec center get repaid? Where's that?
The debt service for the rec center is in the 2019 1% fund.
Okay.
It is down, if you're in the spreadsheet, that debt service is down towards the bottom.
Thank you.
It's in Division 35 under certificates of participation. So you can see what our debt schedule looks like there. It's a little over $1.1 million a year, and it escalates over the life of those of that repayment schedule. The great news is that our rec team does an amazing job of managing that facility. We don't operate that. We operate it at a little bit of a loss. That's typical. All public recreation centers are subsidized. They don't cover 100% of their expenses, but we get darn near close. I think what were we at 94% last year?
Nice.
Which is pretty outstanding. It's not uncommon for public recreation centers to be 75 or 80% cost recovery. So 94 means our staff's doing a really good job, in my opinion.
I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it also goes to show how well utilized it is.
We have significant number of memberships.
Once we get racquetball, Brett will be in there.
Yeah. We are gonna have glow-in-the-dark pickleball, I was told, so that's gonna be
Whoa,
great.
watch out there. You're gonna get Herb at your doorstep. He's gonna watch me.
It wasn't already injury prone enough. Turn the
I
lights
told
on.
Amanda we just need some like really good electronic dance music and a bar, and that glow-in-the-dark
That's a fierce
pickleball
group,
would be
man.
rocking. Yeah, but big kudos to Amanda and her team, and Jeremy and everybody associated with managing that rec center facility. It's awesome. I coach second grade basketball, so if you see me there on Saturdays yelling at little kids, that's what I'm doing. I'm not just a jerk.
Coaching them, not.
Yeah, that's right. Coaching, encouraging loudly. But it's so fun to be in there because it's packed with people. There's people working out. The pool's full. You know, there's a million kids and families in the basketball court. It is just every time I go in there, it kind of warms my heart. So again, some big park improvements planned here to cover are a significant portion of the expenses here. You can see our rec center operation and our capital fees are well covered by ongoing revenues. And so just have a summary sheet here, covers what we've already talked about, so I won't spend a lot of time going through that. But still looking to maintain over $1 million in ending fund balance in all these funds, and significantly more than that in some of them. And lastly, we just have an all fund summary. These summaries were included in your packet too, so I won't go through those unless you have questions. And this is the last slide with numbers. Total beginning balances, total expected revenues, total expenditures. As Trustee Wing pointed out, we have $40 million of capital expenses, so some big projects in the coming year, big acquisitions, big development projects, but still ending with a balance over $80 million. I think when I started here, we were at 32 or 34, so the town is doing well.
Nice.
Next steps, again, fee schedule change review, and then the budget adoption, hopefully on December 10th, along with fee schedule and mill levy. I won't go through the whole fee schedule. If you have any questions about the changes, they're highlighted in that fee schedule. I know it's very small and kind of hard to read. Happy to cover any of those tonight if you have interest in doing so. But I think most of the changes are probably pretty self-explanatory. Where the big changes are in the fee schedule are associated with development and making sure that we're capturing enough in development review fees to cover the expenses associated with reviewing those. They are in line with communities around us. Johnstown, who I think everybody recognizes as very development friendly, are either at or even in some cases above us in development review fees. And so I think even though those numbers are significantly more than what they were previously, we think they're justified based on our needed expenses, and they're also reasonable within the market. So I'll just kind of leave the fee schedule at that. I talked about generally the funding requests. So that was called out differently on the agenda. The only real significant ones were a slight increase in the Historical Society from $70,000 to $80,000. The increase from RAFT, which we're still working through with them to make sure that we're on the right dollar amount, and then the ones you've already approved, like Golden Links and a little help that we'll have for next year. So I won't dive into those unless you have any questions. With that, I will end the budget presentation. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions?
I thought it was great, really, really, very comprehensive, a lot of detail, ton of good. Do you ever, I don't want to say alarming is the wrong word, but that the fund drawing down at the, that's 33%-ish, but we're drawing that fund down. And I just wonder, do you ever do a illustration of a 3 to 5 year that's got projected budget, not for us to approve, but just as an illustration, here's a 3 to 5 year budget, here's the capital expenditures, here's our fund.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, so we did that with the board. Maybe that was all part of last year's budget. At the time, we had about $105 million in capital expenses that we expected over the next 5 years. I think we're still probably in that range.
Okay.
And kind of looking out and making sure that we could both continue to afford to operate, continue to afford to pay for those and maintain solid fund reserves. But we would draw those reserves down substantially, but that's primarily what we've been saving that money for.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Excellent. Do you have any, oh, go ahead.
I had a few minor things, just diving into the details. One thing I was thinking about, I think Keith and the rest of the staff have done a phenomenal job on the sidewalk program, along with our street updates. Looking forward to this year, we're tackling a number of projects again. I think all of them are excellent. One in particular I was eyeing was, we're tackling the Bunyan Mill overlay as one part of the project. And then we're doing sidewalks on Fourth as kind of the primary area targeted. But we do have a gap along Bunyan, running along both sides of the tracks. And it'd be nice to see that completed, particularly on the south side of the road next to the school. But having at least one length of sidewalk, I thought would be really advantageous to tackle this year. I was really happy with like the extra funds that we had last year to tackle Welch. I think that portion turned out great. And if we could, add additional funds for that, I would really appreciate it. I don't know if the board would be supportive.
No,
of
you
that.
brought it up before. I think that makes total sense. I don't know the cost, but I think it's definitely worth staff looking at because that has been there since I was born. So
We do have, we have those two gaps. I believe both are accounted for in what we think our sidewalk demands will be. I'll confirm with Keith and we will make sure that that is included. We have discussed that and the gap on the south side of Spartan between 10th Street and 9th Street. So there's that row of like junipers and Russian olives.
Yep.
There's a gap there on the south side of the road that we have a design for and that we plan to construct next year. It will require the removal of the trees. We're gonna work the property owner. We've had a lot of conversations about planting new trees that the town will help, will cover the costs of. But so we have that gap and the gap and some gaps on Bunyan. Probably not all the south side, I think like you've referenced. But I'll confirm with Keith. We'll make sure we identify that in the December 10th meeting.
And then two questions on the fees. Looking at the new fee for a half plot, what does that entail for the cemetery?
I'll, maybe Clerk Samora will address that. I think I can suitably address it, but he's probably
I was just curious about that one.
Certainly, let me pull that up real quick just to refresh my memory. It's a great question.
So I think, and Clerk Samora can correct me if I'm wrong here.
I got so many morbid answers to that.
Well, and I mean, we're talking about the cemetery and we're talking about death, so that always feels a little uncomfortable. But so the way that we had it previously, it was advantageous to buy a half plot.
So with the revision to the cemetery fee regarding the full and the half plot, the reason why that fee has increased is because right now, as it's structured with the fees and the full plot and the half plot, you could go and really purchase two half plots, and you could place, say, two cremains into those half plots. Whereas with a full plot at $1,550 as opposed to $920 for two half plots, you would be able to place three. And so what we have seen is a little bit of value engineering, you could say, where if you purchase several half plots, it's a better value than purchasing a full plot. So to help prevent all of the half plots from being purchased for that purpose, there is a proposed fee increase that would be the equivalent of half of one plot rather than a little bit more than a quarter.
Okay.
So that's kind of the rationale behind that.
No, that clarifies things. A little worried about that one, but.
That's the real answer.
And one more fee I wanted to bring up. Talking about residential and non-residential solar fees. Those seem substantially higher than what I've seen elsewhere, but, and it also seems, at least to me, as an activity we might want to incentivize or encourage. What was kind of the reasoning behind those fees. I mean, the 500 for residential, already existed. That was on page 10 of the fees. But we had the addition of the, 1,000 for the non-residential. I was just wondering kind of the thought process.
Was that like a
behind that.
hookup fee or something? Was that
No,
like to expect it?
those are permit fees, so those would cover, like plan review and inspection.
Mhm.
And so on the non-residential side, we would be expecting a significantly larger installation. And depending on how they're installed and where they're installed, those can be a lot more complex than kind of the traditional solar installation on a residential rooftop. And our code actually requires passive solar infrastructure in new homes, so even on the residential side, it's pretty simple for, especially for newer homes, a little more complicated on the existing side. I don't know, Ann, oh wait, oh yeah, Ann's still here, okay. I turned around and didn't see her for a second.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add to that?
No.
Yeah, so just that some of these non-residential solar installations can be more complicated in both their kind of review, plan review, and then inspection efforts.
I think that's all.
I do think, you know, you can incentivize things with fee structure, so if that's something the board was interested in doing, that's something you could choose to do.
No, I mean, the reason I brought it up, just looking at some of our other electrical fees, you know, tackling, you know, typical electrical permitting, you know, you're in the low hundreds for a lot of that and stuff. Temporary meter, I mean, I'm just wondering if there's like a reasoning behind it from a staff perspective on time versus some of these other electrical things.
Yeah, I think, again, depending on the nature of the system, it can be more complicated or less complicated. So it's kind of an average of what we think might cost to do the review of the plans and the review of the installation. So a minor electrical permit might be very simple, might not even require plan review. Whereas a solar system may require plan review and then inspection on site, maybe even multiple times as opposed to just once. So it's intended to cover the expense associated with that that application. But again, I think you could incentivize that if you chose to by making it less expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's ever, I've never heard a complaint that it was too expensive, at least on the residential solar side. And on the non-residential piece, we actually don't really have, I'm not sure that we have any non-residential solar installations that I'm aware of.
Yeah, no, the residential side was maybe the priority, I guess, from my standpoint, I guess, you know. In a larger project, obviously, $1,000 is not that substantial, but, you know, for homeowners and stuff that are trying to make their houses more resilient, I would like to see a lower fee, I guess, for that.
I just don't know, what's an average fee, do you know? Maybe we could get that to staff and then.
That's something we could certainly look at, and we can bring that
Makes sense.
information back to you. I'm not sure I know what the average fee is outside of Berthoud, so that's something we can look at. Yeah.
That's good. Other questions? Though this is just direction, is there anyone in the audience, which is, I think, all staff and staff spouses, and Lynn, anyone wish to speak to this? Okay, bring it back to the board. So this is just direction, I believe, to set a hearing. The cheat sheet doesn't say that, but the actual packet does.
Couple items I want.
Oh, go ahead.
That's okay. I'm just trying to follow our typical procedure of questions and then comments. So
Let's
that
do one thing first. Is everyone in favor of 10 to 950? I think we can cut it by 950. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Trustee Albrecht.
Real quick, the Larimer County conservation contribution from Berthoud. I do feel like 150,000, which you had already allocated, is a good amount because it is obviously within our intention to preserve land in the Berthoud area, and that contributes directly to Berthoud. I don't necessarily think we need to go to the full 200 to match Loveland because we aren't the scale of Loveland. But I just want to make that side comment that I think, I appreciate you saying that 150 would be an appropriate partnership. And that's my 2 cents on that one. It's very small consideration when we had talked to, I think it was Historical Preservation Committee when they gave us an update. I asked how we could incentivize perhaps more meetings, and he said food. And just one thing I thought of is if there was a way we could have a small budget for a, inexpensive food option, like a few pizzas to support a local business to have for our committee meetings. I personally think that they don't get paid for that time, and they dedicate and devote a lot of hours to Berthoud's future and well-being, and if we could provide a meal for that small group, I think that would be well worth the money spent. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Oh, I think that's great. If we have openings, one great way to bring people in is food, so.
Right,
I don't
brings
know.
people together.
You
for
again,
sure.
you probably would need to look at what that is.
I think it's probably relatively simple for us to do. We may have existing budget that would allow us to do that without adding. I'll go back and double check, but I think that makes good sense.
I know we had a similar conversation at Youth Advisory Committee, where the kids had talked about having, like donuts.
They used to have
And
pizza every meeting.
To be,
for a
to
while,
be able to
and
have,
they still do, but-
try to get other kids to come in and participate and that kind of thing too. So, if they know there's food, maybe they'll come.
I know I'm motivated by food, so that's.
Yeah, it's a good motivator. Small,
That's a good idea.
small thing, I think it could go a long way. And then the one big thing that I'd like to bring up and also to kind of pull the board on is we had talked about in our strategic planning session the possibility of adding staff to Walt's team so that we could have a dedicated kind of full-time Main Street personnel that could kind of take what, especially Tim Hardy has done and build on that framework and really run with, pursuing grant money and being the direct liaison to those downtown businesses. I know that could be in tandem with the DDA. If the DDA goes through, there will be a dedicated staff person that would be facilitating. So they could, wear that hat if that does go through, and if not, we'll still have a dedicated downtown person. So I just wanted to bring that back, because I thought we had talked about
did.
that. And I would like to see that staff, be added to the team sooner rather than later. I don't want to wait another calendar year personally, because it's hot topic.
Cloak to my question during the presentation was kind of thinking about economic development specifically, so.
So, we will have the opportunity to do some things like that next year with the existing budgets that we have.
That's great news. Is that a priority, I guess?
Yes, again, the slight opportunities exist, but are you planning on putting one in?
I think some of it depends on whether or not the DDA moves forward. I don't want to duplicate efforts. Even if the DDA moves forward, we may still want to hire someone because the DDA will likely contract with the town to run the DDA for the first few years. That's typical. And so I think there's reason to do it regardless. But we expect some organizational changes in the coming year that will allow us to do that.
And the reason I bring up Main Street program is just because I know that other communities have utilized that program that's already available to really boost their downtown really vibrantly and quickly with, additional outside funds. And that's why I would love to have someone devoted to just that. But just for my, part, it'd be good to see something move forward with that.
Sure.
Those are my main takeaways from the budget. One more thing is I wanted to just make a request that I'd love to see if there's opportunity to have fee waivers for desirable downtown businesses. If we want to incentivize restaurants coming in, that we, have some sort of plan that we can, have fee waivers available to restaurants, because that's what we're pushing, and I think that's something that the board could, weigh in on. But that to me would help with the continuing increase of costs for doing small business in Berthoud and everywhere, to know that Berthoud's actually trying to incentivize downtown business boutique.
So the good news is we do have an incentive policy already approved by the town board from a few years ago that allows us to do exactly that.
And what
So
did
we
that
offer that,
encompass?
fee waivers, building and planning fee waivers, expedited permitting, all of that can be done. We did the facade grant and the sign grant program at the same time, so we count those as possible incentives as well. But the adopted incentive policy has two components to it. There's a kind of a primary employment incentive policy, and it's a little different for like manufacturing type businesses or big office developments. And then we have a retail and restaurant incentive policy that allows us to do all the things you just described. So we offer that every time we meet with folks so that they know. We would prepare an incentive package based on their needs and also what we think makes sense
financially for the town, and you have to approve those when they get, we don't have the right to do that without your approval, to offer or to finalize those incentives, but we do have a policy that kind of sets the stage for that.
Sure. And one of the reasons I bring that up is I noticed that the increase in fees, there were so many fees associated with a business that had liquor licenses and any type of liquor-related licensing. There was a lot of different, kind of nickel and diming. And so I just want to make sure that
Those are all statutory, so all of our liquor licensing fees are statutory. We could actually increase our fees if we decided not to. We just stick with the statutory ones, but
that's good to know. Thank you. That's helpful.
yeah, those are good comments and questions.
And I think previous meeting you were bringing up building permit fees. You kind of gave us an average, but Trustee Albrecht's request, which the board seconded, was to kind of look at the comparative of it and accessory dwelling units and kind of same idea how to incentivize that. So I mean, putting that into this budget would, well, we don't know what we're looking at yet. So
Yeah, so we do have a comparison of fees. It's tough because it has to be very kind of development specific. So you can create a fee comparison for a 5,000 square foot restaurant here versus 5,000 square foot restaurant there, or an ADU versus an ADU. But you can't do like a blanket building fee comparison. So we can come back and share those details with you.
yeah, I think it was
But
more
again, I
so.
think-
I mean, we don't really care what a water heater costs here versus
Yeah,
there.
yeah, 100%.
But when we're trying to incentivize affordable housing,
Sure.
idea.
And our policy, I think, as Mayor Pro Tem Murphy pointed out, I think with respect to affordable housing is something we need to do and probably will almost certainly tackle after the completion of the housing plan.
Cool.
Kind of how do we better incentivize both with development codes, but also permitting fees and inspection requirements, all those things. How do we better expedite the availability and construction of affordable homes?
Thank you.
Yeah, this isn't funding request. I guess it is. I mean, the other thing we hear is this Christmas lights, which is awesome, but every time they're awesome, they have to grow, right? And then the other side, the garden spot, so springtime flowers and baskets and stuff like that. Are we planning that stuff? I don't know if that's a funding request, but.
So we do have some professional fees budgeted. We use those professional fees for, like in the general fund, for instance, we have a professional fee line item, and we cover a whole variety of consulting-related expenses associated with priority projects or with kind of needs that come up throughout the year. Two of the things we've talked about are, we've already talked to two different design consultants about it. We'll most likely solicit proposals after the first of the year, but to do an expansion of plantings downtown. I like to affectionately refer to as the Hanging Gardens of Berthoud.
Hanging? There'll be hanging baskets?
Like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, right?
Hey, man,
Great wonders of the world. Like, why not?
I've been grinding this since 2017, so I have to come hang out in the garden. I'm done, man.
So I
I'm
think
tired after tonight.
I think we've heard you, and we wanna figure out a way, like, how do we blow out the plantings downtown in a way that we,
That would really help.
And then the other is, how do we do Christmas lights? So Keith and I have talked about professional decorations in Town Park, and we do have some money budgeted for that already in our existing operations. And I should have mentioned, I could feel Amanda giving me the stare. One of your priority projects was a new kind of event, regionally focused event.
Yeah.
Amanda and her staff put together this really awesome event calendar. You'd be amazed how much stuff goes on in this town once you put it all on paper. We'd love to share that with you as well. But so we were trying to find how can we add to our calendar without stepping on somebody else's toes? And I think
which is near impossible. So
which is darn near impossible with how much stuff's going on. And so what we decided, what made more sense, is let's piggyback and consolidate all of our Christmas events as best as we can, work with our partners, and then also do our own really big, I say Christmas winter event, Christmas holiday event, including, blowing out decorations in Fickle Park or Town Park, one of the two, and a whole host of activities. They've got a really awesome event plan. So we did include money for that as well. I should have mentioned that before, sorry.
It's really cool. Great. Any other funding requests?
Just real quick on the lights, have we come up with any budget or just a scope of what it would cost to put lighting down there full-time?
That's part of that professional fees. So in addition to fees associated with doing enhanced kind of holiday lighting, we also want to look at what will it take to do additional lighting downtown. We already know we have some limitations with the electrical services that are there, like we don't have outlets at every tree and those kinds of things. And then our streetlight poles are not structurally sufficient to handle the weight of lights, unless they're like not commercial grade. And depending on how they're hung too, right? Like CDOT won't let us put them across Mountain Avenue, and can we run them pole to pole? And anyway, so we're gonna use some engineering related expenses to just evaluate that and see what it will take to add to downtown.
We need to consider dark sky too, right, while we're doing that?
Yeah, we can do some really cool hanging lights. I mean, like the ones at the rec center are technically dark sky. They have shields over the top of them.
And they're beautiful.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They look like little flying UFOs, which is kind of fun. But yeah.
Awesome. This is fantastic. Anyone want to provide this direction here, top of the packet?
And I've been making a list of all the things we talked about, so hopefully we'll capture all these by the 10th.
Move to schedule a hearing.
Move to schedule, yeah, public
Yeah.
hearing.
Sure. I'll move to schedule a public hearing on December 10th, 2024 at the hour of 6:30 PM or as soon thereafter as practicable to consider the adoption of the 2025 annual budget and associated ordinances for the town of Berthoud and to direct staff to publish a notice for the same in accordance with the local government budget law of Colorado.
Awesome, thank you. Is there a second? Trustee Kurtz has moved on this. Trustee Wing has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Wing?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht?
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz?
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck?
Yes. Excellent.
Thank
Want
you.
to stay up there?
Oh, yeah, I guess I
All
can.
right.
And if I may, just 2 seconds before we move on to the next item, I just want to say thank you to Cindy. You all know Cindy, and she is an unsung hero behind the scenes in the town and what she does, her institutional knowledge, her financial management. She's an incredible asset to the town. This represents an enormous amount of work for her. I just stand here and talk for an hour and a half, so 2 hours, however long that was.
Thank
But,
you.
Anyway, wanted to thank her and her team. Awesome.
Thank you very much, Cindy.
Thank you very much, Cindy.
All right, final item tonight is the, start over here. Is the Will County Road 5 property purchase. This is an update. I think it also has a, depending on what you're looking at, I think this has a request on it, doesn't it?
It does have an action request.
Okay,
It
cool.
does.
Administrator Kirk, I'll hand it over to you. We can do this. Oh, we can't. Let's, move to, let's do it till 10 PM. Is there a second on that?
We're not doing executive session.
No, we're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a second, or are we cutting it right now? I think we should keep going with the meeting, so let's do it till 10 PM.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we got Trustee Kurtz a second. All those in favor say aye. Second, all right, cool.
This will be very brief. Thank you, Mayor Karspeck and trustees. The Weld County Road 5 property purchase, the Shaw Farm, that we've been working on. You may recall the purchase agreement had a provision that we had an initial $20,000 escrow deposit. We had another $80,000 escrow deposit due on November 28th, which is in a couple of days. That at which time that 80 plus the original 20 becomes non-refundable. We don't close until April. The primary reason for that was GOCO funding timelines. We can't afford to purchase this property with or without the GOCO grant, but the GOCO grant will allow us to then buy the next open space property. So it will help us kind of move money around. We feel very confident that we have a lot of confidence in our ability to get that grant. We were invited to apply. So the GOCO grant process is set up in such a way that you submit a concept paper. It's like an initial grant application. It's a lot more work than it sounds like.
But we prepared that with our partners at Colorado Open Lands, and Ann has done an amazing job kind of helping to drive that process. We submitted that to GOCO. They narrow down those requests and invite a handful of projects to apply. There are more requests than they have funding for, but we feel like ours is, it's a high priority for them for a lot of reasons. We think our request is reasonable within the amount of funding they have available. So we're very hopeful that we'll receive that funding. Regardless, the reason why we set the 28th is we wanted to make sure we were invited to apply. Once you're invited to apply, there's a very high likelihood that you'll get that grant on a percentage basis anyways. We did get invited to apply. We think that we're ready to commit to purchase that property regardless of whether or not we get funded, but we feel very good that we're going to. So we wanted to have that check-in with you before the 28th and make sure that we're all still on board with placing that additional escrow deposit, because at that point, if we do back out between now and closing, that $100,000 that we put down is non-refundable.
Any liability there?
I don't think so.
Other questions?
Just real quick, can you just remind me the intent of this space? Obviously, it's for open lands. Were we planning to preserve it as farmland or recreation? What was the intention?
The intention is to preserve it as farmland in the short and medium term. Most of the open spaces that we're acquiring along the river corridor are intended to preserve prime agricultural land and a large buffer to the river. We would also then use it for a trail corridor as we assemble all the parcels together along the river. With this acquisition, there's only 3 properties between this parcel and the Lewis Heritage Farm in Beefus and Wilson, all these other properties that we're working on. So there's really just 3 left to close that gap, one of which I think we have a good beat on, and maybe the second one we may as well. So we want to continue to farm them the way they have been farmed, and maybe enhance those farming activities in the future, continue to apply the water rights on those lands that have been used historically there. And then the town can use them for other activities, but in all cases, they would either be parks, open space, or agricultural preservation.
Beautiful, thank you.
Awesome. Sounds great. That's what we've talked about, so just keep going down that process.
That's what we're hoping, and that's what we would recommend, that we continue forward with the acquisition.
Excellent. All right, is there a motion to approve? I can just read it off. To direct the town administrator to continue with the acquisition of the Wild County Road 5 open space and to fulfill the non-refundable deposit requirement of the purchase and sale agreement.
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem has moved on this. Trustee Wing is seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy,
Yeah.
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes, all right, unanimous. Excellent. Very long, very good evening. Not a very long evening. We've had later ones. This is a very good evening.
You can't tell when you're having that much fun.
Yeah, budgets are, Cindy's gone, but they used to be midnight things.
Used to have like 4 or 5 study sessions.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do reports here. Oh, well, let me just, explain real quick. We're not doing an administrator eval. I just saw the link to the meeting. Also, the presenter, it's Thanksgiving week, so she couldn't be here. She can be here on Tuesday, so I talked to Administrator Kirk and Mayor Pro Tem, but we can do it Tuesday. We can do it at 6:30, so anyone planning going to the study session, you don't have to adjust your schedule. Does that work with everyone? So we have to, as part of this, get it to finalize the agreement by the end of the year. But would next Tuesday work for most people that are going to be here?
Yeah, if it's allowed, it works for me. I didn't know you could have official business for study
So
sessions.
it'll be in advance at the same time as the study
It'd be the
session?
same time. So 6:30, instead of just doing one thing, would be 2 things that night. Yeah, we might have to call a special meeting, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, it'll be noticed as a special meeting, not a study session.
Okay.
Or we might notice a special meeting and then a study session, but we'll work through those details.
Cool, that looks like a good, okay. Trustee Albrecht.
Just a couple things, it came up during the budget as you talked about different monument signs for the parks, and I just want to put my little gripe in that I'd like to have park signs that don't look like the one at Berthoud Reservoir, that to me look kind of rusty and more like natural open space land in like other places. That's my one little gripe. Everything you guys do is golden. Like, I absolutely love your ideas and staff, but I just heard that and I thought I've been meaning to say something. I'd love for our signs to look more similar to the monument at the entry to Berthoud on the east end, on Mountain Avenue, the white stone. It's just so classy and small town feeling versus industrial open space. You know, it's just different. And so that's just my thoughts. I don't know what the intention is, but I just wanted to throw that in there while I was thinking of it.
It was a long couple meetings. Staff had a contractor with several designs, and the board at that time chose the rusty design.
Yeah.
But it was some thought going into it.
Yeah, the Corten steel and the board form concrete, that, we've built those at Berthoud Reservoir and at Wagner. We intended to build them at the bike park and town park as well, just so that everything kind of matches, but I hear you. I mean, I would do it differently, I think, myself. I like those designs too, but yeah.
No, never, doesn't hurt to change them if you don't. I think, I'm fine with them personally. I think they actually
there's
look good.
value in
Never want to
having,
be wrong longer than you have to be.
I like that.
I think there's value in having consistent look and feel among all our parks, but
Do you remember, okay, I could send her, if I
They
can
are
remember the
great.
time frame, I might be able to look up that meeting and we can send her that, to look over the.
probably 2019.
2019, yeah,
Probably.
because we were approving that for Wagner too.
Yeah, Berthoud Reservoir and Wagner at the same time.
But there were several designs in that packet, so I can.
And
I'll
we did
find
do
that
like
link.
a cheaper version out by Berthoud Parkway. The one actually at like the reservoir parking lot is the much more expensive lit Corten steel and concrete. The one out by the road, we did a cheaper version just because those were like 30 grand a piece. They were not cheap.
All right, yes.
Just real quick too, one of the things that's been keeping me up at night is the Arboretum and just how big that project is. And the more I think about it, the more I really stress about, you know, being economical with the purchases of what's going in there, as well as the water conservation types of plants that go into that, because of I'm concerned about water use and longevity. So those are just a couple things that I know we've already approved everything, but it's not in existence yet. So I just want to put that little anecdote out there that I'd really like to see that really be a conservation example, and also maintain the mountain views, that we don't have so much density in there that we lose the view of the mountains, which I think is the only reason I really truly want to preserve that piece of land, because that's the outcry of the community, is that view. So that was just something I was thinking of. I'm absolutely so impressed, like after the budget, with everything that you guys have done. And Chris, if there was any way for the community to see the strides we've made just since you've been here, I think they would be blown away too. The way that we're preserving ag land, the increase in our water capacity and our new lines that we're building, and the water acquisitions, that when we hear so much griping on community pages about not increasing infrastructure with growth, I don't think that's true at all. Like, that's all we talk about is increasing infrastructure. And so if you guys want to put any press out or communications out about what those big strides have been in the last 10 years, I would fully support those communications going out to our community to let them know, like, we are making grand leaps and bounds for the betterment of the entire community. We're not just increasing for the sake of increasing, we're making it better for people who live here. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Thank you.
So do you have a communications?
Trustee Hardy?
We do. We have money budgeted to do some videos actually in 2025.
Trustee Hardy?
Nothing.
Trustee Kurtz?
Just real quick, it's a compliment to our mayor here. I had the privilege of watching Will present at the South Platte Forum. He was on a panel with the mayor of Fort Collins and the mayor of Greeley. Did a great job representing our town, talking about our water history, our kind of, alluding to our robust portfolio, our robust planning process for acquiring new water as we grow. I just think you did a great job representing the town. Yeah.
Half my nerves were because I was presenting to you. And then, and you also volunteered me for that, and it turned out to be really fun. So thank you. Trustee Wing.
I just think a budget is incredibly critically important, and I thought you guys did a super job on that, and it's kind of where a lot of things start. And there's a few things that are more important than the fiscal stability of the town. So I just give huge kudos for the way the whole budgeting process played out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem.
just some updates from tree committee. Let's see, got that here. We've been having some good meetings, just talked about kind of where we're going with things. We'd like to do more tree plantings than just Arbor Day during the summer. We're also talking about expanding the tree walk program. That's had a lot of success. And then we've finalized the calendars that we put together from all the artistry from the 2 elementary schools, and hopefully I can get you guys a copy of that and stuff. But
Please, that would be awesome.
yeah, we're handing them out at the schools and kind of around town, so they'll be available and stuff. And let's see, what else? They're obviously excited about the Arboretum and the plans going forth with that, so I will keep them informed on that. Again, for these budget presentations, crystal clear on intent and direction. Thank you, Chris, for presenting. It's nice to not have any comments, really, you know, because you guys are doing an exceptional job, honestly. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, I wanted to actually talk about kind of board compensation, you know, after sitting through the last meeting, which ended at what, 11:30? I think it'd be wise to review that and stuff.
So you have to do that, you probably already know this, but you have to put that can't affect the current board, so we'd have to wait till an April election, and then if we approved it, it would affect.
That would be my thought,
Okay.
is not for this
Sorry.
budget, but to look at April 26th for upgrade.
I totally agree. I mean,
So,
after I learned what Johnstown trustees are making.
anyhow,
Yeah,
that's all
great
I've got.
idea. Staff? No, I have no updates for staff.
I don't have anything else other than what we've already talked
Yeah,
about.
it was fantastic.
I feel like I talked enough for tonight.
Mayor, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I forgot to say, I wanted to let you guys know that one of the things I'm thankful for is each of you this week. That truly, like, I think about this town and it's my favorite place on earth. And it wouldn't be that way if there weren't amazing leaders and staff and like citizens that contribute and sacrifice, and this board has been so amazing to work with. You guys all add such value from different, perspectives, and I really enjoy being in this seat, and that's a true novelty. So I just wanted to thank you guys.
Yeah, likewise.
Right back at you.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Council,
No report.
welcome. You got a long drive back.
Yeah.
Anything from law enforcement? Chief, do you have anything, sheriff's office you want to bring up? Nope. You're doing great. Okay.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
I read the report, and the number of traffic stops went up unbelievably high. Was there something going on? I mean, what, did you see it?
Yeah, I did. I think part of that is that our traffic safety unit from the county came down and did an enforcement operation in
Okay.
Berthoud for a few hours.
Okay.
So they knocked out quite a few
Yeah,
traffic
they did.
stops. Also, our calls for service volumes were down, which allows more free time for the deputies to go out and do traffic stops, so.
Okay, I thought maybe it was a full moon or something because those numbers just spiked through the roof, so.
Most of that's probably that traffic safety unit doing an enforcement
Okay,
operation.
thank you.
We're increasing retrograde right now, so it all happened beforehand.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Have a great night, everyone.
You get like chief to arrest a train.